Okay, Madam Chair, you are good to go.
Terrific. Well, good morning, everybody. And let me welcome you to the meeting of the Board of Governors of Pennsylvania State System of Higher Education. I'm delighted to see everyone. For those in the public and the media who are watching via YouTube, we say welcome and good morning. We're so glad you're here. So just a little bit of housekeeping first for our board members. We invite you to keep your video camera on if possible, but to keep your microphone muted unless you're speaking. If you would like to speak or ask a question, use the raise hand button, which is at the bottom of the screen or inside the participants tab. I never quite know where it is. Sometimes it's under reactions too, but you'll find it, it's there. So anyway, let's kick off and I'll ask Sharisa, please, to do a roll call.
Yes, good morning. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yes.
Yep. All right, thank you. Representative Tim Briggs.
Here.
Governor Nicole Dunlop.
Here.
Governor Alexander Feefalt.
Here.
Governor William Gindelsberger. I see you there. You're on mute.
Mute. He's on mute.
Thank you.
I'm here.
Thank you. Governor Donald Hauser.
Yes, hello.
Senator Scott Martin.
Here.
Governor David Mazer.
Present.
Governor Marian Moskowitz.
Here.
Governor Thomas Mueller.
Here.
Secretary Ortega. Designee Tanya Garcia.
Here.
Representative Brad Roy.
Here.
I believe, thank you. Senator Judith Schwank.
Here.
Governor Michael Shaw. Chair Shapiro.
Here.
Governor Sam Smith.
Here.
Governor Larry Skinner.
Here.
Secretary Meg Snead.
Here.
Governor Stephen Washington.
Here.
Governor Neil Weaver.
Here.
Governor Janet Yeomans.
Here.
And Faculty Liaison Jamie Phillips.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum, Madam.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
I want to mention that yesterday the board met in executive session from 4 p.m. to 4:47 to discuss legal and personnel issues. We have a number of new faces joining us today for our first public meeting as board members. And I might have already said this, but you could not have joined us at a more I think exciting, challenging, yet hugely opportunistic time in our system as we proceed with our institutional integrations in the West and in the Northeast. So today, let me please welcome Dr. Tanya Garcia, the Acting Deputy Secretary and Commissioner for Post-Secondary and Higher Education. You will be with us, Acting Deputy Secretary, when Noe Ortega is not available to attend in his new role as Acting Secretary of Education. And we're so happy to see you. Thank you for being here. Great. I want to also welcome 3 new governors to our board. Bill Gindelsberger, who's a trustee at Shippensburg University. Bill, welcome. Larry Skinner, a trustee at Cheney University, and Michael Shaw, a former trustee at Shippensburg University. And to all of you, we say welcome. We're so happy to see you. And we look forward to having the benefit of your perspectives and your thoughts and comments going forward as we pursue these important items.
Thank you.
So it's hard to imagine that we're actually closing in on 1 year since the pandemic, which so significantly changed how we operate. And in that year, we did see thousands of students graduate from our universities last summer, thousands more start their college career this fall. And we're now back in gear for another spring semester in our pandemic I guess mode is the right, I'm not quite sure what the word is, but in our pandemic mode on campuses and remotely. So it's not what any of us would have imagined the year would hold, but again, thanks to our dedicated students, faculty, and staff and administrators, we are making it work. And in the middle of all this, we're gaining some incredible momentum with system redesign, and particularly with institutional integrations, which is now at the heart of our redesign. So in today's meeting, we're going to hear an update on those efforts. And I think you're going to be pretty impressed by what's been accomplished since our last board meeting. But I think one of the most remarkable things is the way that this process has not only unfolded, but continues. We have had nearly 1,000, that's 1,000 students, faculty, staff, and community members who have been involved in the redesign and integration efforts, and are sitting in various places on task forces and committees, and other opportunities to offer their input. So this is really, I don't know, this is a committee of the whole in the biggest sense of the word, taking place here, and making these redesigns happening. We're also going to consider action today on SERS pre-funding. That is critically important because it presents an opportunity to invest as we need to be investing to make sure this redesign happens. We have needs around technology and other areas that we'll talk about. And we have this opportunity to fund redesign in that way. And so this is a seriously important topic. And another extremely important issue that we're going to talk about is an update from the Board Commission on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in system level governance. The work that commission is doing, it's being led by Vice Chancellor Denise Pearson, it's an integral part of everything that we're doing with redesign. It is not a separate effort. It is not a separate initiative. It's not happening in parallel. It is absolutely and positively part of the entire system redesign and the integrations, and we'll be looking at a presentation on that a little bit later. We'll also take up important business from the University Success Committee and the Governance and Leadership Committee. So we have a busy full day ahead of us. So before we start and really get into our business meeting, I want to go a little bit out of order and do a special recognition right here at the top. What we want to do is honor former Governor Dick Thornburgh, who passed away about a month ago at the age of 88. And Governor Thornburgh had a long and remarkable career in public service to our state and to the nation. Those of us who are old enough to remember, and the rest of you can read about it in history, he was an amazing leader, calm and steady during the 3 Mile Island incident in 1979. He also left an indelible imprint on higher education in Pennsylvania. He was the governor who signed into law the enabling legislation that created the state system. And we are here today as a legacy of his support to higher education, to public higher education, to accessible and affordable education in this Commonwealth. As a small way of honoring his contribution to creating our system, I would like to read the following board resolution. And to receive it on behalf of the Thornburgh family, I would like to welcome our good friend, John Thornburgh, who is the son of the governor. So, John?
Yes, good morning, Cindy.
There you are, John. Okay. Good morning. It's really good to see you, and it's a true honor. I have a true honor in reading this resolution. Whereas Richard Lewis Thornburgh served the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania as its elected governor between 1979 and 1987, before leading the U.S. Justice Department as Attorney General. And whereas Senate Bill 506 to create a statewide system of publicly owned universities received the support of the Pennsylvania Senate and House during Governor Thornburg's first term. And whereas Governor Thornburg signed the bill into law on November 12th, 1982, thus creating Pennsylvania's state system of higher education and launching our mission to provide high quality, affordable public education to all Pennsylvanians. Therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Governors of the Pennsylvania State System of Higher Education expresses its deepest gratitude for Governor Thornburg's legacy of leadership in this Commonwealth and expresses its deepest condolences on the passing of this great leader. By voice acclamation, I move approval of this resolution. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you. John, I'd like to invite you to say a few words.
Well, thank you, Cindy, and thanks to the members of the board and other friends for that very kind resolution. It's an honor for me to accept that on behalf of my family. My father really looked at the formation of the state system as one of his signature accomplishments, and his administration was looking to leverage the individual and collective strengths of Pennsylvania's 14 institutions. And even though a lot of time has passed and circumstances have changed for better or for worse, I'm delighted to reflect on the fact that over those years, that goal is still held front and center. And I had the privilege of being part of that legacy. I served 8 years as a member of the Board of Governors and have seen the impact and value of the system and the 14 universities. And I know my father would appreciate with the work you're doing and the important possibilities that the system has for the future. So again, thank you for your recognition and for your good work.
Thank you, John. We're so delighted that you're here today. And again, I'm humbled to have had the honor to read that resolution, and we wish you and your family all the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're invited to stay.
I think I've been enough of these meetings, so I'll let the important people take over. So.
Okay, then. Thank you, John. I also want to acknowledge the recent passing of former California University of Pennsylvania President, Dr. John Pierce Watkins, who served from 1977 to 1992. He was so pivotal to that university's success, and he will be deeply missed. We've sent our official condolences to the family on behalf of the board and the chancellor. So before we begin the business part of the meeting, we'll go to public comment. If there are any members of the public who wish to offer comments, we ask that you keep your remarks to 2 minutes so that others have time. Randy, do we have anyone on the line for public comment?
Checking the public comment line, there is nobody on that.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me now ask Dr. Jamie Martin to offer remarks on behalf of APSCA.
Thank you, Chairwoman Shapiro. Okay, Chairwoman Shapiro, Chancellor Greenstein, governors, presidents, and guests. It goes without saying that there's a lot going on in our state system and at our universities. Our university presidents and administrators and our faculty and coaches are still navigating the COVID-19 pandemic as they try to safely bring our students back to our campuses. Today, we're going to hear more about the consolidation planning process involving 6 of our universities, and we'll learn who will lead Lock Haven University at this time. Also to be discussed and decided upon is another retirement incentive option offered to our faculty and coaches. While my colleagues and I are interested in all that will be considered today, I want to focus on the retirement incentive program and COVID-19. But like any effective teacher, I will first digress. 15 days ago on January 20th, a new president and vice president were inaugurated. I do not mention this for any political reason. I mention that particular date because it was the 1-year anniversary of the first case of COVID-19 being identified in the United States. On February 13th, 2020, Chancellor Greenstein sent a memorandum to the university presidents laying out his expectations for our universities to reach financial sustainability within 5 years by 2023-24. On that day, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention confirmed the 15th case of COVID-19 in the United States. At the April 2020 Board of Governors meeting, the Chancellor accelerated the timeframe within which universities had to reach financial sustainability from 5 years to 3 years. He also instructed universities to return to the student-faculty ratios that existed in 2010-11, but now by 21-22. At this time, the number of COVID cases was approaching 500,000. A number of consequences resulted from reducing the sustainability timeline, and one of those consequences occurred on October 30th, when more than 100 retrenchment letters were issued to faculty members at 5 of our universities. These letters notified them that they would no longer have a job, and by extension would no longer have health care during a global pandemic at the end of the spring 2021 term. On that date, the number of COVID-19 cases had risen to 8.9 million, and more than 200,000 US citizens had died of the virus. So I now return to the two issues, COVID-19 and the retirement incentive. If this incentive program is approved by the board, faculty and coaches will have until March 15th to submit letters of their intent to retire by June 30th, 2021. They must do that in order to receive the full incentive. This incentive program is extended into the next academic year, with coaches and faculty being eligible for a reduced incentive if they retire by June 30th, 2022. Our hope is that APSCF will be able to work with the Office of the Chancellor to help individuals who are facing retrenchment to transfer into faculty positions that will result from retirements at other universities. We are anxious to work on this with the state system, but we fear that time is not on our side. Until March 15th, we may not know who or how many faculty and coaches plan to retire by June 30th. The date for retrenchment is June 4th. I don't think any of us could have predicted the breadth of this pandemic. Chancellor Greenstein did not have a crystal ball to look into, and he made the decision to shorten the time frame for our universities to reach financial sustainability. But we have a much clearer picture now. There have been more than 26.5 million cases of COVID-19 in the United States and nearly 450,000 deaths. But there is hope. 2 different vaccines are now being administered, with a third on the way. There is a glimmer that our lives may return to some version of normal later this year. Still, nearly 100 faculty members face losing their jobs and their healthcare in early June. What I'm asking you all to consider is this: give us some more time. Give us additional time so that we can help our colleagues find opportunities to transfer to another university in our state system. Give those who will not be able to continue working for the state system the chance to seek a job elsewhere and to be able to go on interviews, find a new home, and make a move when it is safe to do so later this year. Give all of them the safety net of having healthcare coverage until the pandemic is at least in the rearview mirror. The retirement incentive program extends into the next academic year, and we can use that time to continue to work with the state system to meet the chancellor's ratios. If our universities had 1 more year to reach financial sustainability, I'm confident that we can align our workforce through retirements, transfers, and attrition. The Chancellor and I do not agree on everything, but I know that we agree that both of us are committed to Pennsylvania's state system of higher education. We both want to see it flourish, and we both care deeply about our students. All of this is true for all of you on the board. It's true for all of the university presidents, and it's true for all of my colleagues. Our students have endured a lot in the last year and are again facing a challenging spring semester. I believe that by working together, we can ensure that when our students return to campus in the fall, they will find the stability and tranquility that they need and that they deserve. I thank you for your time and consideration, and I again wish all of you and your loved ones continued good health. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. We appreciate your remarks very much. Let us now hear an update from the president of our PACT, Jack Wabi. Jack, are you here? Wait for Jack to
Yeah, you'll just need to unmute yourself, Jack.
get off.
Am I okay?
There you go. Now you're great. Go ahead, Jack. Oh, you're on mute again, Jack.
Okay.
Now you're good.
All right. Okay. My wife hopes for that all the time, that I'm on mute. My best wishes to you from all the Pennsylvania Council of Trustees, PAC. in its first formal meeting of 2021. 2020 was one of the most difficult years in modern history, and we hope that the worst of many difficulties we had are behind us. Many positive things did happen last year. All members of our communities, administrators, faculty, students, state system leaders, legislators, and government officials, alumni, friends of our university, and our local communities all came together to deal with the adversity of the pandemic and also work together to deal with the financial challenges that many of our universities are facing. We hope that efforts to bring about greater accountability, sustainability, and system redesign will bring greater efficiency to our operations, increase access, and save resources. We hope that we will be mindful of the essential need to maintain our university's identities and their economic support of their local communities. The trustees of the university work very closely with the university presidents, and at no time has their jobs been more difficult. In a recent article in a Chronicle of Higher Education entitled "College Presidents Need Help," was stated every campus leader woke up in 2020 to bring ringing alarm clock of the 3 Ps: pandemic, protest, and politics. And so far in 2021, those leaders haven't been able to hit the snooze button or turn it off. It also stated, these leaders say that they are under intense pressure from trustees, faculty, student members, and local residents to find immediate solutions to complex problems that are broadly and not specific to their campuses. The state system presidents also have to deal with the pressure of integration, system redesign, sustainability, and numerous other challenges. We at PAC recognize the enormous stress our presidents are under, and I want to say now to all the presidents that your trustees support you and are grateful for the sacrifices you all are making in dealing with these complex issues. We are here for you to give advice, to hear your frustrations, and to support your broader leadership teams, and to give you time to breathe and escape when needed. We know the Chancellor and his staff and the Board of Governors are under similar pressures, and we want you to know that PAC supports you as well, 100%. As president of PAC, and on behalf of all the trustees and all the universities, I want to say thank you to all the leaders who are working tirelessly to address the difficult challenge ahead. PAC is here to support you in all areas, and my best wishes to all. Thank you.
Jack, thank you so much for those remarks. We sincerely appreciate it, and sincerely appreciate your words of support from the trustees. Okay, let's we're now going to get into the business part of the meeting. The first item is our consent agenda. Can we have a motion, please, to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. The consent agenda passes. And now we're going to get on to get into a discussion of the accountability framework with an update. Kate Akers, Dr. Kate Akers is going to take us through this update, and we're going to see the progress we've made in putting together and really implementing this accountability framework over the past 2 years. Let me call on our Chancellor, Dan Greenstein, first to introduce the item. And Dan, let me apologize because we're almost a half an hour into this meeting and you haven't talked yet. So
I'm
not doing my job.
There are however many people on this Zoom call who are delighted by that. So, but thank you for recognizing. So this is last year, obviously last couple of years, we built out an accountability framework beginning already in 2018, I guess, really looking at the student outcome measures that we care about, the outcomes that we care about with respect of our students, and the measures that we care about with respect of our university's financial health and our system's financial health. We presented, I think, all of those measures to you last year at this time, and got some very good feedback, for which we appreciate. So this year, we're trying a slightly different approach. We're not going to present all of the measures that are in the dashboard, although they are all available to you in an interactive website, which I commend Kate and her colleagues for building, and recommend that you have a look at. What we've done is we've gone through the full dashboard in consultation with our colleagues in the executive leadership group, and we focused in on the ones that are speaking to us, the things that we're watching that are driving our strategic actions. So that's what we will be presenting to you today. So it's a narrower set. It is the things that are really moving us in meaningful ways, and that will underpin various actions and that we bring to the board over the coming year. So without further ado, I'm going to turn to Kate, and as obviously with last year, we'll look forward to your feedback, not only on the content, but also on the structure and how we're using our accountability framework in driving our strategic actions. So Kate, over to you.
Great, thank you, and good morning. And Chancellor, feel free to interject as we go through this. So I appreciate the introduction as well. If we can go ahead and go into, thank you. As the Chancellor mentioned, this is a model that was that we first showed last year, but that has really been in progress since 2018 with the identification of the metrics that were then approved by the board in January of 2019 and July of 19. The two dashboards, so as mentioned, this is a really high level view of these key indicators, but the full information, all of the metrics broken out by university are available publicly in our Board Affirmed Metrics dashboard. So let's go ahead and dive into enrollment as our first indicator. So as you can see here, our enrollment has declined steadily, really from 2010. This is a 21% overall decrease that we've seen. And something that I really want to call your attention to is how linear this trend is. So we may have expected some kind of jagged drops based on prior events, based on, for example, that last bar, that's our fall 2020 data. And so what we're really seeing is a linear trend. I do want to bring your attention also to the box in the right-hand corner that shows some of our student groups and the data. So that first column takes you back to fall of 2010. The second column is fall 19, and then the last column is fall 2020. So given the focus of the work that's happening right now, the impact of the pandemic in particular, it's really important to note how this has impacted our students, specifically within that fall 2020 data number. So you'll see that as compared to fall of 2019, we actually saw an increase in the proportion of our students that are considered to be underrepresented minority. So although we saw this general decline, it did not seem to disproportionately impact fall enrollment for underrepresented students. We also don't see a lot of movement in our non-traditional students, those students that may be considered to be adult students. As well as our out-of-state numbers are very similar to previous years, including kind of a small increase that we've seen since 2010. Our full-time students did decrease slightly this year, as could be expected. And then we are continuing to see kind of a shift in the proportion of our undergraduate students who were at 86% of our total enrollment in fall of 2010, now at 84% in 2020. So we're starting to see some of those small shifts. A group that you don't see on here yet are our Pell eligible population. The data coming forward for financial aid in particular is typically delayed a full year. So we will have reports next year showing the impact on those Pell eligible students in particular. As we take a little bit of a deeper dive into the diversity in particular of our students, of our employees, and of course of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, it's important to kind of note what the proportionality of these pieces look like. So this is the system overall, including information overall for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. These data are also available by individual institution. And I think that that information is really important because it actually looks at the feeder schools, or maybe the top 5 counties from which a university typically enrolls students from, to give you some of that balance. So this breakout is specific to the minority population, and the gold section in each of these, those are our underrepresented minority students. And that category, which we mentioned in the previous slide as well, that includes American Indian, Alaskan, Black, African American, Hispanic, and 2 or more races. It would be hard to talk about enrollment without, of course, mentioning the impact overall that we see on low and middle income families. So this represents the total change in enrollment by family income group since 2011-12. So it's branching out from there, showing what those changes look like. The sharpest declines have really been seen in the lowest income groups. And then really the only group that was holding steady into 2018-19 was those whose families were earning above $150,000. So looking at this information and then kind of thinking about the impact that we expect to see in the future. So the last year that these information are available for are 18-19. And so next year we will be presenting 1 more year's worth of data in this category. All right. As very much related to that, the average net price of attendance includes the cost of attendance, which is your tuition, fees, room and board, any other allowable expenses, and then you subtract any of your grant aid that you may have received. And this is for first-time fall in-state undergraduate students. And what you'll see here, so take a look at that top line, you'll see in 2009-10, the increase to 2018-19 of 62.4%. We're including some information on our comparative universities here just to help you ballpark that number and what it looks like, including a 16% increase in that average net price for Pennsylvania state-related universities, just under 12% for Pennsylvania four-year privates, and then an increase nationally of our comparative institutions by close to 23%. And so when you look at the overall totals, you'll see that this trend has significantly reduced the state system universities' affordability advantage in not just Pennsylvania, but also nationally. Second-year persistence rates are one of our key measures within the student success indicators. This measure in particular looks at the proportion of students that persist from their first year into their second year. This obviously is a very important indicator and really signals the likelihood for a student to then complete their degree. Our institutions as a whole are making progress, increasing those persistence rates. And then we also see increases or comparable information for our underrepresented students and our Pell eligible students. Now, because our persistence rates are high, and they are higher than our comparable institutions, we do see a larger gap traditionally in between those groups. We're going to talk about that a little bit more when we get into graduation rates. But overall, the persistence rate actually increased into the fall of 2020. So that last bar that you're seeing, the fall 2019 data, those are students that started in fall of 19 and then persisted into fall 2020. So this shows you, that we expected perhaps to see a different trend based on the pandemic, but our students were persisting into that second year. And then our second indicator, really along the lines of student success, is our 6-year graduation rate. This is for first-time, full-time students. And when their cohort year begins, so that fall data that you're seeing, those cohorts at the bottom, they have 6 full years to graduate. We even included some preliminary data for our fall 2014 cohort. So those, thinking about those 6 years that they had to graduate. Here is where we really see, when we look at national data, that our graduation rates are higher than our comparable institutions. And what's interesting is this really consistent graduation rate that you see all the way from fall 2009 to that 2014 cohort. What we're seeing nationally is an increase in graduation rates. So as before, back in the 2009 cohort, we had a pretty good gap and a lead in front of our comparable institutions. Now that is really diminishing, and some of those comparable institutions nationally are catching up and could even exceed our rates. Because our graduation rates are traditionally have been higher than those comparable rates, similar to what we see in persistence, there's a larger gap in between our students and our underrepresented students.
$20 an hour or more. Politicians take the credit for mandating wages, but workers who lose their jobs.
I spoke very well,
What did you do in San Diego during the pandemic? I know that you recently.
Jack, I think you want to mute your. Thanks.
And now we can go into, this is actually an excerpt from the system's diversity, equity, and inclusion dashboard. This dashboard, if you haven't taken a look at it, you can get there from the system DEI webpage. So there's a dashboard that shows this information, which is really about the diversification of our employees and of our students, but also the breakout of those student success measures that we just mentioned as well. So persistence and graduation. So here you can see the breakout and the look historically at these various populations. So that gold, the kind of gold piece that you see throughout this slide, these are our underrepresented students and employees. So looking at faculty, looking at staff, and seeing some small increases over time, but really seeing that increase in underrepresented students as we look at the proportion of those populations. One of the important ways that we can look at this type of information is by institution, and we do see significant increases by specific institutions within staff in particular. So we are beginning to really see some of those shifts out in further years. This next section is beginning to get us into our university success measures. The first piece is really highlighting the efficiencies and cost avoidance that have been gained in 2019-20 and then estimated for 2021 within our shared service center, as well as our centralized administrative and finance offices. So what you're seeing at the bottom, these are the total cost savings and avoidances at 57 million. And this is really inclusive and includes the information from the early retirement programs, from those negotiated contract savings for benefits, bond refinancing, and then other negotiated savings. We have 3 primary indicators of financial health. The first is the annual operating margin. So this shows for every dollar of revenue a university receives, how much is left after operating expenses are removed. The state system set a goal. It is a 3-year rolling average, and to have that operating margin at least 2 to 4%. So if your screen is small or maybe just a little bit blurry like mine is, that very top line that you're seeing, that is 2%. And so as you see kind of how this annual operating margin has changed over time, and it's important to note that in the last year, you're seeing a little bit of an uptick there. That was due to a one-time stimulus payout, and that was earmarked for specific expenditures. But as we look at this trend information, and this is single year data, but thinking about that 3-year rolling average, that target, in 1920, 11 of our universities were below that 2% threshold, compared to only 5 universities in 15-16. So we're seeing more of universities further away from that 2 to 4% guideline. Next is annual primary reserve ratio. This measure lets us know how long a university could function and pay all of their obligations, including their debt, without any additional revenues. The guidance here is a 3-year rolling average at 40%. And you'll see now hovering just a little bit above 36%. We're not far from 40%, but we have several institutions that really are far from that 40% and more each year. So in 2019-20, 9 of our universities in that single year were below 40%. And then in 15-16, only 5 universities were below that 40% threshold. And our final indicator today, and our final piece of our accountability framework presentation, is the minimum reserve. It's important to note this is a snapshot. So this is a snapshot of cash on hand. And then we're looking for a couple of different thresholds throughout this. So it's important to note that 10 universities did have a lower minimum reserve in 2019-20 at that snapshot in time than in 15-16, and half of them do not meet the 180 days reserve on hand.
Thanks, Kate. Cindy, if I may, let me just make some just explicit connections between the data that Kate's just been through and the stuff we're focusing on and that you'll be focusing on with us. So obviously there's a lot in there that addresses our diversity, equity, inclusion work. The trend lines are, bluntly, we're doing well, enrolling more underrepresented minorities. And there's positive signs of progress with respect to their retention and graduation rates, but obviously a lot more to do. And with respect to faculty and staff, also positive trends, moving in the right direction, suggesting that we're diversifying our employee base. And it's important to point out the challenges that we have with respect to diversity, equity, inclusion, but also to remember that we didn't just discover this yesterday, and that the trend lines you're seeing represent enormous amount of work on a part of a lot of people to turn those numbers and to begin to see some progress. So we'll continue to come back to that, obviously. Affordability, financial sustainability, affordability is critical. Recapturing that affordability advantage is critical to that, not just to the health and well-being of our universities, but more importantly to assuring all students in Pennsylvania have access to a high quality, affordable higher education. Financial sustainability is a huge part of that. We can't just keep heaping our costs onto our students, but also innovation in the student supports that we provide, the kinds of program pathways we offer to our students, financial aid packaging. So a lot of that work will obviously continue to come up and will affect decisions that the board will be making typically in the spring around tuition and in other areas. And the financial health indicators, obviously demonstrating the cumulative impact of many years worth of work on developing that situation. So obviously it is our biggest and most critical risk. As you'll see later today, the situation that Kate has just outlined has actually worsened, including the last stimulus package. We're $215 million further behind than we were this time last year, so that's not good. But we're obviously, confident that we're making progress through all the measures that we've put into place. Time is not our friend, as you know, and the steepness of those curves is alarming. So that will obviously, we'll continue to track that, and it will continue to drive our action. So we pulled out the diversity, equity, inclusion, the affordability, and the financial health, because that's kind of what focuses a lot of our attention these days.
Okay, thank you very much, Kate and Dan. And that is the backdrop just to reiterate what you said and remind everybody, that is the backdrop, that accountability framework. That information presented to proceeding with the redesign that we're engaged in, and the diversity, equity, and inclusion work that we're engaged in. It's all interrelated, and it all stems from that. It gives us our data-based evidence on which to move forward, and I think it's really important to just always reiterate that we're doing evidence-based here. We're looking at the data, we're addressing the data, and it's just important because it frames everything.
And Cindy, Jamie Martin has a hand.
Okay. I didn't even see, but thank you, Randy. Jamie, yes.
Yes, thank you. And I just want to make just one small comment. And this is something that my colleagues have asked me to at least put on the record. I appreciate the trend information that has been presented, looking at the enrollment trends since 2010. The concern we have is that was the highest enrollment our state system has ever had. And we had a similar linear trend line from 2000 to 2010 where our enrollments grew. And so if you look at a 20-year trend, you're going to see a perfectly normal bell curve where we had similar numbers of students in 2000 as we do now, and a similar number of faculty then as we do now. So I appreciate the opportunity just to put that out there, as my colleagues have asked me to at least identify that trend line as well. Thank you.
All right. I appreciate that. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments at this point? Okay. Let's move into the next item on the agenda then, which is a logical follow from what Kate just presented. And that's an update on institutional integrations. I mentioned before the great numbers and the breadth and scope and diversity of people that are contributing to this and working on this. So I just want to make that point again. I'm going to ask Dan to start things off, and he's going to be joined by Presidents Pearson and Hanna, who are leading the Western and Northeastern integrations respectively. So Dan, do you want to get us started?
Thanks so much, appreciate it. So obviously, let me just, Randy, why don't we jump right into the first slide. So this is a preliminary report, just to remind us of where we are. We're in the middle of an implementation planning phase of work that's described in Act 50. And so this is a preliminary report. We'll talk about the things that we've done, the things that are yet to be done. I'll begin with a kind of why, what, and how of integration, just to ground us. And then I'm going to turn over to my colleagues, Presidents Hanna and Pearson, who will take us through the kind of the content, the progress that we've made. So let me start with the why, what, and how. So obviously integrations emerged from a trend that we became very aware of as our visibility into our financial situation and the impacts it was having on our students became clearer over the last couple of years, so integration emerged from a long-ranging discussion about strategies for the system to recover its sustainability and improve its student outcomes. And it is interesting to me how in the process, obviously financial sustainability is critically important, but the real drivers that we're seeing here are opportunities to expand affordable access to quality higher education for all of Pennsylvania. And so I won't go through each of the bullets on this slide, but the focus of attention is how to create a sustaining, high quality experience for our students by reinvigorating the student focus and dramatically improving our student outcomes in all the ways that we typically count. So that is our why. It's a revitalization as much or more even than a kind of financial stabilization. So let's move up to the next slide. The why, the what of integration. You've seen these, and all of these slides you've seen before. We've integrated reports that we've been making on this topic since July. So just to clean it up. So the what of integration is basically creating a single accredited entity with all the kind of integrated structures that you see there. But critically to retain the vibrant life on each of the campuses, and to ensure that those campuses pursue maintaining their own identity. So we'll come to that as well. And then the how of integration is defined in Act 50, which was passed into law in June, or signed into law in June. As you can see there, we began in July conducting a financial review, just asking ourselves, what if we did this, would it potentially have financially beneficial outcomes? The second phase is the one we're in now, developing an implementation plan. We expect to deliver that plan to the board in April. This is obviously a preliminary and early report on our progress to date. If we deliver the report to the board in April, the board is in a position to give it a contingent approval, which would trigger a 60-day public comment period. And so the earliest we could get a decision from the board on whether or not to move forward with integration would be July 2021. And I want to be clear on this last point, no integrated entity would, an integrated entity would enroll its first cohort of students in August 2022. So still a lot of work to do, long time left in this process. So next, slide a little bit about the what of integration. So, in the first part, the financial review, a lot of that work was done out of the Office of the Chancellor. It was largely an analytical exercise. In the second part, where we're really planning, what the integration and what the integrated entity looks like, how does it work, how does it perform for our students, we really devolved the planning responsibility to the universities involved in considering integration. So 3 universities in the West, California, Clarion, Edinburgh, 3 universities in the Northeast, Bloom, Lock Haven, Mansfield, have established something like 29 or 30 committees or working groups, I guess they're called. The working groups have subgroups. I think there's 215 subgroups. As Cindy said earlier, there are 1,000, count them, students, faculty, and staff at those universities who are deeply involved in these working groups, looking at various aspects of the functioning of a university. And you can imagine working groups with titles like governance and academic program and student supports and enrollment management. So it's a profoundly inclusive process, and we have surrounded, so there's lots of people rolling up their sleeves doing phenomenal work, and you'll see the outcomes of that work. And I just want to pause here a moment and just acknowledge the fact that these 1,000 people, they have day jobs, they're dealing with a pandemic, and yet they're also throwing themselves at this work with incredible kind of passion and creativity, really taking the opportunity, and you'll see it coming out of the work, to imagine how a university in the 21st century ought to look in service to our students and to our employers. So that's kind of exciting, and I want to thank those folks. So there are obviously a bunch of people rolling up their sleeves, but then also surrounding, Randy, maybe to the next slide, the entire construct with a great deal of consultation at the statewide level, board, legislative, council of trustees, association, students, but also at the regional and university and working group levels. Critical in all this is the engagement of students. This is all about our students and their future. So we have done a great deal to involve them. So I'm just going to pause here a moment and turn to President Pearson and Hannah to talk a little bit about how they're doing that, and then I'll come back.
Sure, thank you very much, Dan. I'll take the lead on this. In addition to the statewide advisory council that the chancellor started this year to inform our constituents about the integration processes, students are sitting on that advisory council as well. The Northeast and the Western regions have student advisory councils that advise the integration process. And those students their primary role is to inform us, to put us in touch with other students who need to have voice, to communicate back and forth issues, and to help us populate our working groups and our subgroups. That is manifested in the West with many students being embedded in subgroups and working groups. And those subgroups and working groups are also doing focus groups, dealing with issues related to alumni and so forth. And also surveys are being developed. In the Eastern region, they actually have a working group that they've developed. So our students are heavily integrated into this process. In the planning process, they will also be very involved in the implementation process going forward. As you know, we are set to move after we have approval for implementation, and that's a process that will take several years. So the students will be invested in that process going forward.
That's great. Thank you, Bill. All right, moving along. Randy, just a couple more points from me, maybe one more. Now I'm getting into the process itself. So, you know, what we did with our, having constructed our working groups and populated them with a whole boatload of folks doing great work, we basically asked them, you know, assume that an integrated entity opens up and enrolls its first cohort of students in August 2022. What needs to be there on that? What needs to be there and working on that day in order for that successful transition to take place? And then what are the things that, you know, can be sort of brought online, as it were, afterwards, on what timeline, et cetera. So obviously what you see emerging here is a phased implementation plan. That's what we'll see in April's implementation plan. Really focusing on that fall 2022 start date. What has emerged from the work and is a greater degree of clarity about the structure, operation, student experience at the integrated entity. And so we're going to turn to that progress reporting. A couple of just caveats. There are some chunks of work that are not yet done. And I feel the anxiety and the uncertainty as much as anybody. But I just want to acknowledge that the academic program array has not been settled, and you know it's coming, but it's not here. We have not gone and revisited the sort of business planning, so we don't have those projections. That's not here. We don't have information yet on the organizational structure. All of that is remaining to be done. We have spent our time really defining the basic characteristics of the integrated entity. And so that's where we're going to be focusing our attention in the next couple of slides. Last thing, and then I'm going to turn over to my colleagues. There's a lot of material in this deck. It's why we pre-circulated it. We are not going to run through every slide. We're going to, you know, take you through the highlights, but obviously in questions, take any comments that you may have from any of the slides that are in the deck. So I think with that, I get to turn over to, I guess it's Bashar. No.
Good morning. Thank you, Chancellor. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I think this first slide, my colleague Dale handles the left side and I take the right side. So Dale?
So in keeping with the core principles and the key benefits of these projects, these integration projects, we are really looking and working towards leveraging the promise and the power of 3 institutions on the West and on the East with very strong reputations and wanting to maximize our opportunities for our students. At the core of this is about improving our quality of our programming and the ability to offer not only comprehensive and deep educational experiences for our students, but to make sure that we're able to provide this for generations to come. By combining and leveraging the quality of the institutions and creating one academic array, the student-facing services will be able to leverage those, and the back-serving operations will be less prominent. We can consolidate those things and really put the power into the learning experiences for our students. We are reimagining higher education from the student perspective. And that's why student involvement is so important. And uniting these 3 campuses that are closely entwined in the regions. I am at Edinburgh today. Last week I was at Clarion. We are very close in the region. It doesn't take very long, even with snow, to get up and down in the Western region. And I know that my colleague Bashar has also told me that on the right. But using technology, we're able to deliver things to our students. And the year of COVID has really taught us that. We're really leveraging our ability to do fine programming and continue to work on persistence of our students. We are designing, that's the perspective that we're using, the academic programs and modalities to really meet market needs. We're not doing this simply reviewing academic programs, trimming, slimming, and saying, okay, you know, what are we currently doing? We're also imagining what our students need for the future. And that's a real combination of regional needs, industry needs, and student preferences and students' needs, and working with the faculty who we have who really do understand where they're going and what they need to do for the future of our students. So we're taking our time in this because the academic core is the engine of what we deliver to our students, and that's the most important feature right now. In addition to the efficiencies, that's why we're taking our time to really develop this in a thoughtful way.
Thanks, Dale. as you saw from Kate's slides, one of the things that we have lost in the last decade is our affordability advantage. So we really, one of the key principles here is to reestablish that and continue to be able to offer exemplary experience to our students in an affordable way. If you also saw the biggest drop in students that we've seen over the last decades are students from low and middle income families. And our system was created to serve those students. And we really need to go back and reestablish that core principle. So we are an option for those students so that they can walk across the stage. In doing all of this, Dale alluded to it, we are assessing and evaluating and learning from each other. We want to make sure that everything we do is in the pursuit of excellence, landing on best practices in higher education. Because without our institutions, the Commonwealth will not be able to evolve the way it can. And finally, we want to honor and respect shared governance and make sure that every stakeholder's voice is heard. As you heard from Madam Chair and the Chancellor, there are 1,000 people working on these two integration initiatives in the Northeast and the West respectively. And that's just the beginning, because we are in the design phase and now we move into implementation planning. We're talking about the what today, and now we have to dive into the how. And our colleagues across all 6 and maybe all 14 we'll be asking them to engage in how we get to where we want to. Thank you. Next slide. You saw in slide 20 of the things that in Act 50 and in the Chancellor's presentation back in July of the things that are going to be the hallmarks of the future entity. But in listening to our constituents and recognizing how important some things are to each of the campuses that are integrating, our campuses will always have brick and mortar. There will be student-facing operations at every campus. So the narrative that Lock Haven or Bloomsburg is going to become 100% online and students will only be taking online courses is just absolutely not true. Each campus will have its own leader. The name and identity of every campus is being honored and retained. And we're pursuing a path with the NCAA so that we can retain our athletic teams on all 6 campuses as they exist today. As Dale said, student-facing operations will continue to be the hallmark of what we do for our students, because that is the student experience on our campuses. And our alumni associations, our student government associations, our foundations will also remain as entities associated with their respective institution. The campus leader will have a dual role. He or she may be a VP of an area, but will also be the face of that campus and will be in charge of ensuring community relations with the local region. We believe that's critical both for the communities we live in, but also to expand and extend the goal of each of our institutions to make sure we are a beacon in each of the areas that we live in for economic development and social advancement for our students. You can see at the bottom there, the things that the Chancellor mentioned earlier about a single academic array, a single leadership team, a single faculty and staff, one accredited entity. Everything we're trying to do is to make sure our student experience is exemplary so that they can graduate from our institutions and go on and do great things for their lives and for their communities. Next slide. Oh, wait, before, sorry. The 4th pillar in the Northeast, I'm sorry, Dale. As we've talked about, the Northeast and the West will focus on a particular area in addition to what we currently do. And in the Northeast, workforce development, stackable credentials, and non-degree programs has been identified as an area that we really need to put a stake in the ground and become the premier provider for our region. We can no longer just survive on the 17 to 22-year-old. That's the demographics are not in our favor. So we have to begin looking at what do the corporate partners in our regions need, make sure we put those training programs in place in partnership with corporate leaders, create opportunities for students that may have some college credit but never finished, and also create opportunities for students coming out of high school that may not want or need a 4-year baccalaureate degree. And that's something that's really difficult for universities to acknowledge and admit, but our society mandates that of us. We have to serve all of our constituents, not just the 17 to 22-year-old. Now I'll turn it over to my friend Dale for the next slide. Sorry, Dale.
That's okay. Thanks, Bashar. I want to thank Jack for his comments about the president's not hitting the snooze button for the last year. But in fact, it is the thousands of individuals who work on our campuses who have not hit the snooze button either. The individuals who have been on the integration process have gone into this project with enthusiasm, with passion, and also an investment in the future of our citizens of Pennsylvania. I am so proud of the work that they have done thus far and look forward to seeing what comes out in the next few months and in years indeed. The students and the faculty and staff on these committees have already shared and learned from one another. They're already changing the way they work across the system, and we're already becoming better as a result of this. So this is pretty darn exciting from my perspective. At Cal, California, and Edinburgh, it's very similar to our friends in the Northeast in terms of the identities and maintaining the regional prominence of bricks and mortar, the program, the investments in industry, and the career needs of the region. We've been doing certification all the way up through professional doctorates in this region for years, and we will continue to do so. We will be working as a unison in New U, creating a new university with an additional focus. We'll have a 4th campus, which will be our virtual campus. We have a large portfolio in the Western region of online offerings. At Edinburgh, 1/3 of our portfolio is graduate programs, many of which are online. At Clarion, it's 1/3 of our portfolio. At Cal, it's about 1/4. So our faculty and staff have been delivering amazing virtual campus education to the rural communities, and indeed also to the urban areas in Erie and also in Pittsburgh and beyond. So this is an area we're going to continue to develop and aggressively compete with Southern New Hampshire and other universities that have indeed come in and stolen the student population and shifted them to national and out-of-state programs. We really want to give individuals a online experience, a virtual experience that is for Pennsylvanians, offered by faculty, real faculty who offer real degrees in quality programs. That's what we have to offer. We've been doing it a long time. We feel by partnering in the region, we can not only offer this to the regions and beyond, we can also compete nationally. In addition, the virtual campus will become an online hub that will provide services for the rest of the PASHE system at the undergraduate level. We will be there to help and assist faculty as they convert their knowledge to disseminating it through a virtual campus means. We're very excited about that. So that's the difference in the Western region from the Eastern region. Just a lot of similarities though. All right, next slide. So so if you look at these seven squares, or what I call 7 buckets, on the left side, we start to talk a little bit about, first and foremost, our student success. Again, as I alluded to earlier, we are developing education that is the highest quality and affordable, getting back our price point to our students for generations to come. We're really reimagining the way we deliver education by combining and coming together. The 3 institutions in the different regions coming together, we will be able to ensure that our students will have the educational opportunities, whether it's through certificates or a doctorate in nursing practice. We want to, so that is first and foremost the most important thing. The student success, Kate talked a little bit before about some of the gains we've made in terms of our gaps and our persistence of our students. Our faculty and staff really rock, and they are so good. By putting these resources together, we will be able to ensure that they will walk across the stage virtually or physically. They will have the opportunity to attain their academic credentials that they strive for. The student success piece will not happen without the core engine of the academic programs, and that has a lot to do with our faculty, and that's why we're taking time to develop that right now. The quality program, we're hoping that not only we will streamline and look at what we need to be offering and what we can build and offer in the future. That means not trimming down programs. That means rebuilding and building them stronger. We're looking forward to strategically getting ourselves in great shape so that we can continue to expand our portfolio. We believe that we will have increases in our enrollment, and we can capture, particularly in the West, we will be able to capture the virtual market. And we already have a good presence in that area, and that's a new revenue stream that has really, we've not paid a lot of attention to. We've done it more as happenstance, and now we're going to do it in a strategic way. The addition to that, keeping students is better than trying to recruit new students. So making sure our retention stays in place. That doesn't just happen by good programs and good teaching. It happens by having staff who could actually follow up with the financial aid, the success coaches, the library services, all of the things that need to happen for our students so that they can continue. We also want to ensure, and embedded in all of this is our diversity, equity, and inclusion focus. Going forward into the implementation stage, we will take forth the recommendations and move them into strategic changes and policy. Right now, every team is being evaluated on have they met the diversity priorities and inclusive priorities? Have we paid attention to that? And going forward, we will carry those forward. Those will be key leaders moving into the actual implementation stage. Now, in closing, I'd just like to say that unless we hit our markers financially and plan this right from a financial and sustainability perspective, we've had extensive review of what all of those things mean today and where we are as a state. If we will plan this in a way that will be sustainable so that new U's on the West and the Northeast will be successful and something of pride for the citizens in the years to come. Next slide. I think that's pretty much, I've covered the functional areas, so I'm good. So I think in the end of all of the work that we've done, the learning, the work that we are going to go forward. Right now we're planning and we're doing the planning phase, but actually we're beginning to plan for what happens should the board approve the plans going forward. We can't just say, oh, wait 3 months and say, oh, now we have to, they said it's okay, so now we have to pick up and continue. We're actually moving towards the planning phase now, because regardless of if it's approved or not, the state system is in a sharing mode and a shared design, and this is the work of the future. So we are very proud of this integrated process that we've done thus far, and we are looking forward to presenting the plan to you in April.
Thanks, thanks Dale, thanks Bashar for your leadership and for your teams and their work on this. Again, there's a lot of information in the deck and we're happy to address any. I see there's a few hands up, so a couple more slides and then we'll open it up for general discussion. So issues and risks, obviously there's a number of these and the important point I think to call out in this slide is that, you know, obviously having recognized the risks, you know, we're also building ways of mitigating them, which is good. One risk which is not here, but will come up in a later presentation today, I mentioned earlier, is the profound impact that the pandemic has had on our on the system's finances and on the finance and the financial health of its universities. That is, if anything, accelerating the processes that we're involved in, or at least providing a greater sense of urgency to them. So Randy, maybe move on to the next slide. Slide right there. So so what remains? I sort of forecast this earlier in the presentation. There's really a few pieces of work that just they're not done yet. They will be done. We're on track. One of them is sort of landing the academic program array, what it looks like. Another is the organizational chart, as it was. You know, what's the structure organizationally of these of an integrated entity? What's its governance, and then we can revisit the financial forecast that we prepared in the initial high-level financial forecast that we prepared for the financial review, so that we can get a better sense of the costs and revenues associated with the integrated entity over the next few years. From those last three pieces, we will the kind of evaluation that needs to be conducted on the impacts on students, faculty, staff, and community will naturally spin out of that. So, so that's our story. Open up for questions and look forward to the conversation.
And Madam Chair, go ahead.
Yeah, hold on, wait, I can't find myself.
You're live.
Am I, can you hear me? Because I can't.
Out there.
Okay, I couldn't find myself. I didn't know if I was on mute or not. Terrific. Great presentation. Really appreciate it. So much food for thought there. So I do see the first hand I see is Senator Martin.
Yes.
So Randy, help me out with others. Oh, I see Tom Mueller also. Let's start with Senator Martin. Yeah, you're on mute. You're fine. Okay.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for the presentation. And I also want to thank Dan and his team, wearing my other hat, for keeping the legislature up to date. And I know we'll have some other processes required by the act coming up for updates in the future. But the one question I had, and I for one am a huge advocate for the role that athletics play in the development of our young people. But I do have a question about with the integration, and I mentioned, or at least I heard about going through the NCAA and looking at the different things. What, in terms of the financial aspect and looking at it from a long-term financial stability or sustainability standpoint, what will the numbers look like in terms, are the programs, will they be operating at a loss, or will they still need more university support in order to backfill by maintaining the independent programs for each of the locations? Could someone potentially address that?
Yeah, great question.
Dan, do you want me to take it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Senator, great question. And let me just, as a background, if you remember, the first thing we did was we started out as everything is going to be one array. But we allowed the data to really guide us. So with the help of our Baker Tilly team and our athletic directors and coaches, we did a deep dive into analyzing every team on every one of the 6 campuses. And with very, very few exceptions, every one of those teams actually brings money into the university. Because as you know, in Division II, very seldom, if ever, do you get a student who is on a full ride and getting a full academic and room and board. So the students actually contribute to the overall tuition revenue of the institution. When that data surfaced, that's what really guided us and convinced us that we pursued a path we're pursuing with the NCAA to try to maintain athletics in the complement that they currently exist at all 6 campuses. What a great question.
That's good. So you feel for the time being that, you know, it's economic. You did basically an economic impact study of them, and you'll be able to still remain in compliance with Title IX and things like that.
Yes.
Actually, we have the opportunity through this analysis to expand some of our rosters and potentially expand new teams in the regions selectively based on what high school athletes are pursuing when they go to college. For example, we don't have a men's lacrosse team in the Northeast region. So those are the things that we've actually been looking at. And we have the opportunity, if it all materializes, to increase our student enrollment by about 500 students in the Northeast and West by adding a couple of teams here and there.
Okay, and my final point to that would be, so if moving forward, if let's say the trend lines, that they continue in the direction of, hopefully they do not, would the possibility of, if you're starting off, let's say out in the Western region and you have, I'm just going to pick it, you can tell by the wrestling, about 3 wrestling teams, all right? And over the next few seasons, you see that the numbers aren't acting up, you know, or adding up. Would the NCAA entertain creating the one team for those 3 institutions? Is that something that's possible?
Because we're going to be a single accredited entity, we would be allowed to do that if the numbers go in the opposite direction than what we're seeing right now. Yes, Senator Marr, that would be allowed.
Okay. And how many of yours are the Division I? Do we know in the 6 institutions? I know Lock Haven Wrestling and field hockey are both D1. At Bloomsburg, wrestling is D1. Clarion and Edinburgh, if I'm not mistaken, Dale, please correct me if I'm wrong, are also correct. D1 wrestling. And all of the others are D2. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for the answers.
No, thank you. Great questions.
Sam Smith, then Tom Mueller.
Thank you. I want to go back to something we discussed a little bit in the work session, but I'd like to get a little more direct answer. And I'd ask this of Dr. Dale and Dr. Hanna. And of course, Chancellor can chime in at any time. The same basic question, but to Dr. Dale, as you create the virtual campus, one of the concerns I have is that the integration, rightfully, the process with all your 1,000 people that are trying to help figure out what all we need to do is taking us a priority. And I guess my concern is that while we need to make the integration work, we can't do it at the great detriment to the other schools that are not a part of the integration. So I'd like you to give me some insight as to how the virtual campus, in your case, and the workforce credential work that's going on in the Northeast in Diane can address how those are going to function without significantly undermining or taking away opportunity that another school that's not a part of the integration might need to venture into as they work on their, our bigger picture thing of all is sustainability. So these two things have a way of potentially conflicting.
Oh, yeah.
And I'd just like to know that we're addressing it and that we're not ignoring it in the midst of the big picture priorities.
So we are addressing, I'll talk about the online, and then my colleague Bashar can talk about the credentialing piece. What we're looking for in the West, one of the reasons we focused on the undergraduate online is because the graduate programs that are offered across the 14 campuses right now are very strong, and traditionally they recruit the students from the undergraduate pool on the bricks and mortar campuses. So that's one of the reasons why we focused on the undergraduate and also degree completion. We have erratic systems for degree completion across the 14. So we want to offer some consistency and opportunities for students across the system. We will be building a virtual hub that will have instructional designers and a lot of different back office supplies, resources, personnel who the rest of the PASHE system can actually access. We'll be working in partnership with the 14 campuses as we go forward for new online undergraduate programs that are developed in a shared revenue basis so that no university will be at a disadvantage going forward.
Excuse me, Dr. Can I interrupt you? When you say we're going to be working with the other schools, is that something that's part of one of the working groups now?
Yes, we have several working groups working.
The other schools informed of what you're doing, so that you might be aware of something that would be a conflict, just an innocent mistake kind of thing. Is that happening now?
Yes, it is happening right now. We have 86 people working on the undergraduate online and the online endeavor. And also concurrently, the provosts, the chief academic officers at the 3 campuses on the West are working with the 14 provosts across the system on a plan for a business model so that ultimately every campus will be able to not be hurt by any new programs. We believe that we'll be able to actually help recruitment and also enrollment at the other 14 universities when this is completed. And then I think, Bashar, you can talk about the
Sam, initially the workforce development and stackable credentials and non-degree programs is really going to focus on the Northeast region where Bloomsburg, Mansfield, and Lock Haven are. But long-term, we want to be a service provider. And if I can give you an example, if a corporation needs to train its workforce in program X, and that program is already being delivered by Westchester University in their region, we would actually contract with Westchester to deliver that service. We don't want to duplicate effort. We want to really be able to collaborate and leverage the strength of all 14 without impacting any one of our colleague institutions adversely.
I love the concept of the service provider that you just mentioned, Bashar. If all 14 campuses, given our various financial situations that we're in, some campuses have more resources than others, but not all 14 can afford to have a full complement of designers to help with online development of programs. So we hope that those institutions that don't have that resource will use us as a way to develop and enhance their enrollment.
And our next question is from Tom Muller, and we have about 2 or 3 minutes left in this session. Tom?
Mine's a very quick question to anybody. Do we have an idea of when we might hear back from Middle States and the NCAA?
Well, we were just on the phone yesterday with Middle States, so we're in a process of working through with them. It's a long process. There are several stages. We have to submit reports. They give us more feedback. We submit more reports. So, Tom, I wish I could tell you exactly when we would have the final answer, but we are working with them and meeting with them. And I'll let Bashar answer the NCAA because we've had several meetings with them too.
Tom, we had several conversations with the NCAA. We shared with them our vision, and we are on the agenda for the Division II Membership Committee conference call this coming Tuesday. And we will be presenting our case to the membership committee and hopefully getting a decision from them before the end of that conference call on Tuesday. That's being optimistic, but that's our expectation right now.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Alex, I think you may have your hand up.
I was trying to just go back and forth. The only question I have is, when do you think you'll have the academic programming piece completed by?
They're working, they're very close in that right now, but as I said before, it's a very complex task. We think probably, I would say at least it'll be a month before we have the real meat of it developed.
Will there be any sort of preview of that planning before the April board meeting?
All of the groups will make that information available. Thanks, Alex.
Okay.
No more hands right now, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you very much. I would just add to the question that I think it was Tom had about accreditation. I have a stack like this to read before giving the chair of the board signature to the initial reports that are going to Middle States. So, I can testify. This is just the first set, right? So this is it's a big process. This is a very big deal, but we're working very diligently on it. We'll stick to timelines, and we'll do it as expeditiously yet thoroughly as possible. Okay, so I think at this point we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we will come back to our next agenda item. Randy, do you want to put your world famous clock up?
There you go. See you back in 5 minutes.
welcome back, everyone. Just wait for all my little boxes to fill in. Okay. Okay. The next item on our agenda is an update on the work of the Commission on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in System Level Governance. And that committee is being chaired by Governor Jan Yeomans and supported by Dr. Denise Pearson as our Vice Chancellor and Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer. I just want to say a couple of words and then ask Dan to say a couple of words before we turn it over to Denise and Jan. This is critically important work, and what we're doing here is setting the stage for a strategic plan that will really be a system-wide strategic plan. But the work has to start at the board level. We set the tone. You know, we are the ones that have to kick it in and really have a deep understanding of how critically important it is for our students and for the system. So, you know, I said this a little bit earlier. I just want to reiterate, this is not a one-off initiative. This is not a parallel effort. This is, you know, we have to start somewhere, and we are starting somewhere. But the intention of this is that diversion, equity, and inclusion is completely woven into every aspect of system operations, obviously at the campuses, et cetera. It's critically important from the point of view of serving our students of color, but it's equally important from so many points of view, economically, socially, et cetera, for student success, for student outcomes. So I just want us to, you know, keep that context in mind when we hear from Jan and Denise on this topic, that we're not creating a parallel system or a parallel effort. What we're doing is starting the integration of diversity, equity, and inclusion in everything that we do. And Dan, did you want to say a few words before we start?
Yeah, thanks, Cindy. Just a few things. So there's obviously been a lot of interest recently in the press and elsewhere in the equity and the race equity challenges that confront higher education as they confront all aspects of our society. But, you know, and that's great. We welcome the help. These are hard problems, and you know, solving them requires really all hands. But these problems are not new. They're not new to me. They're not new to my colleagues, our students, our faculty, and our staff. And we've been working against them for years. And it is important, at least to me, that we take a moment and acknowledge that work and their efforts, and we support folks in that work. And so, at the risk of embarrassing just a few people, and I'll be brief. So President Carter at Shippensburg, I think, has shown 4 years improvement in the persistence of underrepresented minority students, making a significant dent in the equity gap that exists there. President Driscoll and the IUP community has mounted a free speech project, the Free Speech Project, tackling some of the thorniest free speech issues that we can get entangled in. It deserves national attention for the quality of the work and its impact. President Fiorentino, the progress that Westchester University has made diversifying its faculty from 14% to 26% in the last decade. President Long at East Stroudsburg University has increased enrollments of underrepresented minority students from 24 to 44% and made substantial progress ensuring ESU is welcoming and inclusive for all its students. And President Walton, who presides over the nation's oldest historically Black university, increased enrollments by 50% in the last couple of years, doubled the first to second year persistence rates. Obviously some setback there with COVID. Has seen a 60-something% increase in 6-year graduation rates, and in his spare time with his community has saved the university's accreditation and made tangible progress against persistent financial challenges. So I'm not going to go through all 14 universities, but I could, because there's that much work going on across our system. And yes, we have a lot more to do, but also we are on it, and we have been for some years. None of the trends that I just identified happened overnight. They didn't result from neglect or indifference. On the contrary, they result from dedicated, comprehensive, aligned, and purposeful efforts of all of us, students, faculty, and staff. This kind of movement requires active engagement of everyone, working together against the hardest problems that higher education faces. And because we don't live in a culture of acknowledgement, sadly, in my view, I want to just take this opportunity for all the folks who've pushed all that movement. Really hard effort. Thank you so much for everything you do. With that, I turn it back. And thank you.
Okay. Denise, Jan, please go ahead.
Sure. Jan, did you want to say something before I kick off the presentation that I have prepared?
No, Denise, I think you have enough to say, and
Okay.
I think we should hear from you. And I will certainly be here to entertain any questions or perhaps add something after if there's anything I think of. But please go ahead.
Awesome. So my updates are going to be divided into two sections. The first section will present updates on the Board of Governors DEI Commission. As you probably recall, it was established at the October 2020 Board of Governors meeting by Chairwoman Shapiro. The second section will provide you some updates on the work out of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, where I have the privilege of serving as its first Vice Chancellor. Next slide, Randy. I want to start by reminding everyone that when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we are talking about three different but interrelated terms. Quite simply stated, when we're talking about diversity, we're talking about the differences amongst us, such as our race, ethnicity, gender, religion. But when we start talking about equity, we're talking about fair treatment, which is not always equal. And then finally, very simply stated, when we talk about inclusion, we're talking about those actions that foster feelings of being valued and respected. It's important for me to remind folks of the differences between these terms, but also the connectedness of it, because we can put forth all the effort we want to diversify our students, our faculty, and our employee rosters. But if they are met in environments that are inequitable or are not inclusive, we're going to find ourselves wasting valuable resources, and that's just not going to get us where we need to go from a system redesign and a sustainability perspective. Next slide, Randy. Okay. So what you see here is a breakdown of the 6 components of the commission charge. One of the first things that we did in preparation for preparing a board statement affirming the role of diversity, equity, and inclusion was we surveyed the entire board to get some baseline data to get a better understanding of their readiness to engage in this work, to build this framework that we were charged to do. And one of the things that first of all, we got 100% response rate, and that was great. Thank you everyone for taking the time to complete the survey. But what we found very clearly was that there was a sense of urgency concerning the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in system level governments. And board members also acknowledged the importance of DEI for PASHE University's future success and sustainability. We were able to draft a statement of affirmation and commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the plan is to bring that forth during the April Board of Governors meeting. Next slide, Randy. So what I'm going to talk to you about now is some of the work that's coming specifically. Actually, Randy, would you go back to the previous slide? I'm sorry about that. The second charge was to look at board policies from an equity lens. And what we found, what we did was, we established a subcommittee to work on this particular charge. And what we noticed right away is that PASHE does not have a policy or standard process to develop, monitor, or revise board policies to ensure that they do not adversely impact students, faculty, or staff, particularly from historically excluded groups or underrepresented minorities. We've begun the work to develop a policy for policy development and review with a DEI lens to ensure that we're creating an equitable state system. We've also surveyed other systems for best practices, and we will draft a recommendation to the full commission next month or before. The third charge was regarding DEI metrics, and the Board of DEI Commission has reviewed the current DEI dashboard metrics. We've begun to explore the system DEI goals and outcomes. We've clarified and confirmed that DEI should be reflected in each of the 3 system priorities: student success, leveraging university strengths, and governance and leadership structures. And we are committed, obviously, to ensuring communications and reporting are simple and transparent. The fourth charge refers to identifying potential resources. I love this one because for me, it means funding for all of the great things that we want to do. And we are having, I think, fruitful conversations with the PASHE Foundation. And I am confident that we will be able to find, I'm confident, I'm prayerful, and maybe a few other things, that we'll be able to get the funding that we need to support this work, because it is tied to system redesign and system sustainability. The fourth charge around the BOG structure for DEI, that's yet to be determined, and I'm sure that Chairperson Shapiro and Chancellor Greenstein have some ideas about this, and they'll be bringing it forth in the future. And lastly, with regard to the DEI advisory group, I am thrilled that we have now a board of governors, a DEI board of advisors working out of my office. We launched just last month, and I look forward to working with the DEI Board of Governors Commission to support and advance this work. Now, Randy, I'm ready for the next slide. So this is the second and last part of my presentation, which is going to just give you a quick overview of what's happened out of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And it starts with a system-wide focus. And I believe that we are well on our way towards building a solid operating capability, starting with, as Chairwoman Shapiro said, leadership from the top. We have a Board of Governors DEI Commission. We have an Office of DEI led by a Vice Chancellor with dedicated staff and budget. We have, I believe, effective communication channels that will continue to improve. And we have execution capabilities with university chief diversity officers, advisory structures, and critical feedback loops with key university, system, and statewide constituencies. The other thing that we've done, we've created an accountability framework. There are DEI goals that are part of the system's accountability framework and factor into budget allocation decisions and chancellor and president's performance evaluations. My colleague Kate Akers talked earlier about the public dashboard with data related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we will continue to build out that transparent system of reporting and accountability. So we're really thrilled about that. Next slide. So here are some recent actions that I want to share with you. We've recently mandated diversity training for all students and employees. My colleagues in the Office of the Chancellor have already started the training, and university HR officers are working with their teams to implement it at the employee level. and chief diversity officers are leading efforts on their campus to implement these trainings for students. So we have made some, I believe, tremendous progress in that area. Another thing that we've done, we've established a system-wide structure for reporting incidents of bias and discrimination. And we're collaborating with chief diversity officers and other leaders to develop a universal reporting structure and a community response team training mechanism to promote safe and inclusive environments on all campus communities. I mentioned a moment ago that I've assembled a DEI Board of Advisors. We convened our first meeting last month. We're in the process of developing an outcomes-oriented 5-year strategic plan, which I will present hopefully in its full form at the April 20th board meeting. We published the first edition of Connectivity, the bulletin of PASHE's Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And if you haven't seen it, you can find it on the DEI website. And then lastly, we have hired a director for diversity, equity, inclusion in Corinne Gibson. She comes from Slippery Rock University, and we're just so excited to have her. But I just, to be a little lighthearted, I want to let everybody know that I did get a friendly "do not steal any more of my people" call from President Berry after Corinne accepted the position. And President Berry, I promise you, I will work really, really hard to never do that again. Next slide and final slide. So despite the progress that we've made so far, we know that there's a lot more that we need to do. And here are a few things that are currently underway to various degrees of completion. We're in the process of examining what would a system-wide climate survey look like. We will be planning a state system diversity summit for sometime in the spring. We're going to do an inventory to build off of what Dan said earlier about all the great things that are happening around the system. We'll build an inventory of system-wide capacity building best practices so that the system office can support our campuses to the best of our ability. We're looking at establishing, in collaboration with chief academic officers and faculty, a community of practice that focuses on diversifying the curriculum. As you may recall from previous presentations I've done, this is something that students are expressing concern over, which is the lack of diversity in the curriculum. And I want to work with campuses to build off of some of the great work that is surely already underway to see how the system can support them in that area. And then lastly, strategic planning and implementation. The planning process is underway. However, the implementation phase is yet to be completed. So that is my summary. I think I have maybe 2 minutes for questions, Randy?
Actually, 5 or 6 if you like.
I have 5 or 6. Okay, wonderful. I have 5 or 6 minutes for questions.
Questions, comments?
Forgiveness from Dr. Berry publicly.
Alex?
What will the role be for the DEI director and centralizing efforts between the 14 universities?
Yeah, thank you for that question. That, to give you some very specific things, you know, Corinne will be working on program development. She'll be working on the climate survey. She'll be working on helping me with the DEI summit that we'll be putting together. But, you know, those are some very specific things that we've discussed to date. But I think the larger issue is when you're trying to build a diversity, equity, and inclusion operation to support 14 campuses, one person cannot do it if we want to do it well. And we just did not have the capacity at the system level to execute all that we want to do, all that campuses probably expect us to do with regard to supporting their efforts. It can't be done with one person.
And then do you have any sort of idea or concept for the trainings for students and faculty and employees?
Can you please say that again?
Do you have an idea or a rough concept of what the trainings for students, faculty, and employees will look like?
Absolutely. So we are using Everify. It's a learning management system. And for the staff, we have 3 trainings that we've identified. And I have demoed, if you will, all 3 of those trainings. And each one of them are at the most 90 minutes in duration. And the first one covers diversity, equity, and inclusion in the modern workplace. The second one covers managing bias. And the third one covers accommodating disabilities. And for students, again, it's a 90-minute self-paced training on diversity, equity, and inclusion for students. We do not think that it will answer all of our questions or satisfy all of our needs to build capacity and understanding in this area. But I felt as though it was a good place to start. It's a safe place to start. And we look forward to getting student, faculty, and staff feedback. Thank you for that question.
Thank you for all your work.
You bet.
And Charles Patterson.
I'd just like to acknowledge the contributions of Denise and the work that she's doing, not just for our individual institutions, and she is really embedded in our campuses, talking with our directors of diversity, equity, inclusions, the councils that we've created, but also working across institutions in the region and throughout PASHE. Her work has been really significant since she's arrived here, and I thank her for her efforts in driving this change forward. And it is change, and it's difficult change for institutions to move forward. And I really do think she has done a phenomenal job since she's come. So thank you, Denise.
Thank you so much for saying that. It means a lot. Thank you.
And if I may, I'd just like to say that the commission is trying to work really hand in glove with Denise on everything that she's doing, because so much of what she's doing is going to weave its way into what we need to do from a board perspective, from our governance responsibilities. So it's a great working relationship, and we're trying to leverage what we have as best we can. So it's great. Thank you, Denise.
No, my pleasure. I enjoy working with you, Jan. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I just want to comment, perhaps repeating myself or repeating what the Chancellor or Vice Chancellor Pearson or Jan has said. But there is an expectation that graduates of colleges and universities will have the ability to work in teams, to work with people that may not be from their own backgrounds, that there will be a certain level of knowledge and sophistication and embracing, of all types of people. And also basically in the literature and studies, and we know from our own business sectors that we deal with, employers are really looking for people that exhibit those capabilities. And so this is a multifaceted issue and a multifaceted purpose. And that's why, when we talk about student outcomes, it's not only making sure that all students succeed, get their degrees, get them on time, and get into good jobs, but that we're satisfying workforce needs. And this is the workforce need of now and certainly into the future. So there is every solid reason for pursuing this path.
Hey, Cindy, can I make one additional point?
Please, Dan.
And that is really in the vein of also singing Denise's praises. So, I just wanted to call out the fact that the achievements that have been accomplished since our arrival in August were accomplished at record speed for higher education. And just a couple in particular, which would normally take, I don't know, 3-5 years to pull off. One of them is the mandatory training that's been put in place, but the other is the incident reporting, which is now being done consistently across our universities. And that testifies to Denise's leadership, really to her servant leadership, to the relations that she's built in such quick time with the chief diversity officers and the presidents, and frankly, to the energy that we all feel around pushing this ball forward. So, Denise, I can't thank you enough for making the journey to Pennsylvania.
Yeah. I mean, considering the bench strength, which is relatively limited, right, in the chancellor's office, you're doing it by, how we're doing all of redesign, by working with people on the campuses at all levels, and it exemplifies, I think, really symbolizes everything that we're about here. So my thanks to you, and my thanks to Jan, and to everybody on the campuses who are working, in concert on this. Okay. We're now going to transition into committee sessions. We have two that are on the agenda, one for the University Success Committee, and then for the Governance and Leadership Committee. So let me just give a reminder. I am very much of the mind, which I think people know, to be inclusive and open. Long ago, welcomed all people to the table, and I still do. With that in mind, there are certain conventions and, I don't know, rules, I suppose, that we have to follow during parts of the meeting where we're discussing potential action items. That has to do with what's coming up now for these committee discussions. So all board members, please are encouraged to participate, and we will, be having to limit the discussion forum to board members. That includes the faculty board liaison. And then when we come to voting on action items, that's going to be for the committee items that are going to come up. Committee members only are permitted to vote. So I hope I haven't hopelessly confused everybody. If I have, let me know. But with that, let's transition to the University Success Committee. And I want to draw special attention to the action item opportunity that we're going to be considering today, which is around SERS pre-funding. And I'll just say a word about that before we get into it. Obviously, as a board, along with student outcomes, the big thing we talk about are the financial struggles that the system faces, and particularly with regard to, because our operating difficulties are such, finding the funding to invest in critically needed redesign efforts, technology and other things. It's difficult. So I'll just remind us all that toward that end, in 2019, we approved and submitted to the legislature and the governor a historic appropriations request for $100 million over 5 years for investment in system redesign. And so with that, and understanding what's happened, with COVID and the financial situation of the state system, these challenges are facing the entire Commonwealth. Realistically, the chances of being funded at the extra $100 million from the state at the pace at which we need it, because we have had to accelerate our redesign efforts, are more and more remote. Doesn't mean we won't still advocate for it. So I want to put that on the table, but I'm just trying to be realistic here. So we have now another opportunity that's come up through SERS pre-funding. It takes advantage of favorable interest rate changes in the debt market, and we have permission to do it. from the legislature. And so, I think there's a certain amount of maybe fate or good luck or whatever you want to call it around this moment. But we need to find opportunities to fund redesign. There's just no question about it. And we need to find them wherever we can find them. And so, going into this discussion, I would just ask board members, to keep in mind the big picture around this. And let me now turn the gavel over to Tom Muller, who will moderate the discussion items on the table for the University Success Committee, including this one. Tom, are you ready?
And through the magic of Zoom, I have the gavel.
Oh, wow. That's more than I have. That's great.
I'll try to get it back to you at the end here. And I apologize in advance. I'm home alone today with my two 15-pound security alarms, and they tend to go off. They take their jobs very seriously and have no mute button. So you may hear some background noise at some point here. Good morning and welcome. I'll ask Charissa to do a roll call of the University Success Committee, please.
Yes, be happy to. Chair Muller, we have you present.
Here.
Governor Weaver.
Here.
Governor Dunlop.
Here.
Governor Gindelsberger.
Here.
Representative Brad Roy.
Here.
Secretary Meg Sneed. I know I saw her earlier.
I'm here. I'm sorry.
All right, thank you. No, it's all right. Governor Janet Yeomans.
Here.
And we have Cynthia Shapiro as ex officio and President President Patterson.
Here.
All right, thank you.
Here.
Thank you
Everyone's
very much.
present. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a full agenda for today's committee meeting. Most of the items for today's discussion are about how we can continue our strategic financing activities to produce savings, to support redesign activities, to improve services to our students, and to ensure sustainability. We have two items from administration and finance related to the SERS opportunity, and two more which are more aligned to the housekeeping items that we tend to normally deal with. With that in mind, I'd like to begin with agenda items 10B and 10C, and then we'll come back to items 10A and 10D, please. As Cindy mentioned, the first two items we were discussing are the opportunities in front of us with SERS. There are two components of this transaction, so I propose we discuss them together, then vote on them together. The first proposes the system entering into a pre-funding agreement at the 75% level. The second proposes the issuance of the bonds to conduct the pre-funding. This was previously reviewed in University Success and board workshops. Before we start that discussion, I'd like to introduce Molly Mercer, who's our new system CFO. Molly comes to us from Slippery Rock, where she served over 8 years, including roles as CFO and Associate VP of Finance. She also has over 15 years in corporate accounting and financial operations. I'll now turn it over to Dan so that he, Molly, and Sharon can walk us through the proposed opportunity and actions. Dan?
Thanks, Tom. Okay, so I'm going to just begin by providing some context. I'm going to make my recommendation right up front and then talk about why I'm making the recommendation, and then I'll turn to Molly, who's going to walk us through the details. Here's the recommendation, just baldest form. I'm asking that the board approve the system's participation in the SERS opportunity that we'll be presenting, that it will restrict the use of any net proceeds so that they are used to fund strategic investments and to shore up and mitigate any downside risk that might be associated with the opportunity, and that those strategic investments are shown to have demonstrative positive return for the state system, university, and their students. I'm going to ask that you expressly require us to not spend any money derived from this on general operating. It's not a lot of money. It's around $300 million over 30 years, 10 million a year on average. Obviously, in a system with with an annual operating budget of $2.1 billion, that's not really much of a strategic investment fund. I'm going to ask that the board instruct me to consult with my colleagues on the executive leadership group, our presidents, to actually come back with within that framework, a clear understanding of what the investment strategies and processes are, really emphasizing things like return on investment and accountability. So that's the recommendation. Let me talk a little bit about why I'm making it, and go to the next slide, please. So a couple things. So system redesign, as Cindy mentioned, we've been at it for a while. It's about enabling our universities to continue to provide the affordable, high-quality education for all of Pennsylvania. And it is critical to the future of this Commonwealth, as we know. That redesign really focuses first and foremost on expanding student opportunities in ways that are defined there, ensuring that more students that attend our universities actually succeed in getting their credentials, that we expand our programming so that we're serving students who are currently left unattended to, those who are looking for fully online degrees and degree programming, those who are, especially in the undergraduate level, those who are looking to upskill and reskill as adults to remain relevant. And then, a second thrust of redesign is to financially stabilize our universities in the system, critical to getting that in place so we can achieve the goals outlined in one. And then to do any of that requires us to rebuild our operating infrastructure and to think differently about how we work. And that's what we've been pursuing for a while. So next slide, Randy. We have made some estimates about what the cost might be. We did put a $100 million 5-year ask to the General Assembly in last year's appropriation request. We'll have further refined estimates this spring, which will take account of the cost of standing up our integrated entities. And there's funding needed for strategic investment across the system. And there's just a hand, won't read through them, but there's a handful of objects of expenditure that you might expect. Standing up student supports that return real results in terms of student retention and graduation rates, it cannot be done without some focused investment. So there's the need. Maybe one more slide, I think. And here's the challenge. We've talked about and talk about it more in a moment. Last year, I remember the theme of the State of the System address was, we've kicked this can down the road, financial challenges that we face, and the road ended. And, the pandemic didn't, that was last year. The pandemic hasn't made things any better, either for us as a system and our universities, as we'll see. Molly will present some pretty horrific, jaw-dropping numbers. But there are also challenges that confront our state, and we have to be realistic about the challenges that the General Assembly are facing, and that those challenges aren't going to be resolved anytime soon, although we hope they are, and we'll continue to advocate for the kind of partnership that we've been talking about and making progress against. So, there's this theme in which, our time is running out. And so, I'm going to ask us to think about, there are risks involved with these kinds of opportunities, and we need to evaluate them and assess them. But as we do, I want also to think about the risks involved in our not taking this action. And they are profound and they are severe. So I will leave it, I think I will leave it there, but Randy, you go to the next slide and I'll be certain of that. Yep, I am now certain of that. So Molly, this is where I turn over to you. I just want to acknowledge the fact that Molly has joined us in her new CFO role. This is her second opportunity in front of the board. She manages to deliver this news with a smile on her face and a sense of optimism, and I genuinely appreciate that, Molly. So over to you.
Thank you, Dan. So yes, getting into more of the specifics and looking at the financial circumstances, you can see here how the pressures from the past several years have limited the resources we have to put towards investment and sustainability needs. The past 4 years, you'll note, have each had year-over-year declines in net assets. The 1920 drop wasn't quite as sharp, but that's only because we had one-time stimulus funds that helped buffer the impact. One other really important item of note is we now have 5 universities that are comprising almost 2/3 of the net assets of the system, with the other 9 having fairly sharp declines. The patterns of declining resources are evidenced in the primary reserve ratio as well. Randy, if you can advance to the next slide. That ratio compares the reserves on hand to the expenses that an institution needs to operate in a given year. Nationally, 40% is the target benchmark level representing good financial health. We've seen erosion in this across the state system as well. The net result, standing at 36.1, may not look too bad, but if you drill in deeper, you can see we have 9 universities that are falling below the 40% target with a downward trajectory almost across the board. Next slide, and that's before taking into consideration how COVID has affected our universities this year, and you've heard the Chancellor make mention of this. The pandemic impacts, they are substantial. In particular, fiscal 21 has shown sizable revenue losses and costs. A primary driver of this is the low density of students living on campus. That's impacting housing, dining, and many of our auxiliary operations. But the pandemics extend even broader than that. We have added costs across personnel areas, testing, technology requirements, as well as several other operating costs. So collectively for fiscal 21, these have amounted to 171 million of net university losses. And when you consider with that our affiliate operations, together that number climbs up to 244 million. And this is net of the aid that we received last spring and last summer. And I want to point out these losses, whether they're in auxiliaries or whether they're in E&G, they affect the financial health of the entire enterprise. It's all interconnected. So it makes the metrics that I just reviewed being much worse once we conclude fiscal 21. So with that said, the December 2020 stimulus package is bringing much needed aid to the universities. 85 million is provided for institutions to use towards these losses. But with estimated losses standing at 171 million, this will only somewhat address the challenges that we're facing, and it'll leave a sizable gap. One final consideration, if you can head to the next slide, Randy, is that in terms of our financial outlook, and you've seen this trending over time before the state appropriation, but what I want to point out here is that if you look back to 2010, 2011, and those gold bars, you can see that we received one-time stimulus funding back in the recession. But what I also want to note here is that sharp drop that happened immediately after that. That was a product of the downturn of the state economy overall and for our state. And so if you jump ahead and look at where we're at today, a real concern that we have is that same pattern repeating, that the one-time funding might be helping us now with the pandemic, which is very important, but we may once again see these types of drops with the condition of the economy, leaving us again with a sizable gap. So moving on and turning back to SERS, I want to take a few minutes in this presentation today to frame the opportunity and also expand upon some of the areas that we've addressed as part of our due diligence. In summary, the state system has this opportunity as a result of legislation passed a little over a year ago to pre-fund a substantial portion of our unfunded liability in the SERS pension plan. Our share of the liability in SERS is just under 5% of the total plan, or 1.1 billion. The proposal for today's meeting is that the state system pre-fund an amount equal to 75% of that liability with a payment of 825 million, and to do so through a bond issuance. Next slide. So the substance of this transaction is that the state system is buying from SERS a series of credits that will offset our annual pension expense. If they're not used in a given year, these credits roll forward indefinitely. By securing the schedule of credits, we then have a dedicated funding stream that will be used to make the respective bond payment each year. With then, at that point, we have savings left over to be allocated to the strategic purposes that the Chancellor described. So there's sizable financial benefit to the system through this program, and that is because we're able to take advantage of these historically low interest rates. As we reach the final terms and conditions of both the set-off credits and the debt, we've been working with all parties to develop a schedule that both optimizes our return and reduces our risk. We've asked our actuary Aon to take a careful look at this arrangement, and they have estimated our net present value savings net of the debt at $280 million using a discount rate of 3%. This transaction addresses what has happened in the past with the SERS plan and the costs associated with our employees' participation in the plan. This contract doesn't address future risk or performance in the retirement plan or actual actuarial gains or losses and investment performance. As we move into the future, those aspects would still be shared by all employers in the plan, including the state system, in the same way that it works today. But I do want to pause here and elaborate more on our due diligence. There are several considerations with respect to this transaction. We've assessed each of these and we regard their impacts to be minimal. First, we are taking on bond debt as part of this arrangement. To that end, we charged our financial advisor to examine this on our behalf and to model and simulate this transaction with one of our rating agencies. The results of that detailed work with our FA showed this transaction not being detrimental to our ratings or our future capacity to issue debt. The rating agencies, they're very familiar with our circumstances with SERS. Their view is that this is a favorable transaction for the system as it generates strong annual cash flow. A second consideration to keep in mind is that we are a participating employer in SERS, and nothing about this arrangement withdraws or alters our participation as one of the 102 employers in the plan. We will remain as such, and while our out-the-door contribution will now be smaller, it will continue to vary based upon the performance of investments at SERS and other actuarial experience in the plan. Those are the same risks that we have today and that every employer has in the plan now and into the future. In terms of the investment performance of our specific $825 million lump sum contribution, there's no direct risk to the system for this. Our returns are stipulated in the table of set-off credits in the pre-funding agreement, and they're not affected by whether the market performs better or worse than expected. With respect to our lump sum or any employer who decides to contribute a lump sum, SERS will engage the services of their team of investment professionals that advise them regularly on the strategies to maximize return and minimize market timing risks. And you can see from their report, their CAFR, that the SERS returns and investments, specifically I'll call out their 10-year investment return on the fund, was 8.1%, which is almost exactly aligned with the external benchmarks for their investment mix. And lastly, where I do want to spend a few minutes of time is to address the risk of the SERS setoffs falling below the SERS expense. Because of the changes in the retirement plan offerings, we wanted to mitigate the potential of plan expense shifting around over time. And so we engaged our actuary to help us specifically analyze this risk, and we evaluated this in detail with them together. And to that end, at our request, SERS has provided us now with a couple of options of set-off tables, and there's a third option that's in development. And what these options do is they tier the set-off credits to front load a sizable portion of them in terms of the contract. So for example, one of the choices we have awards us about 2/3 of the monetary value of the set-offs within the first 10 years of the program. And hand in hand with that, we're working with our financial advisor who has presented us with several options on the debt that will stagger the debt payments to align them with the SERS savings. So the years where the SERS credits are the highest, we will have higher debt payments. And likewise, when the SERS setoffs are lower, we will have lower debt payments, leaving all years having a positive cash flow. All of these scenarios contain the stipulation that unused credits carry forward indefinitely. And so with that said, we really have these two components, the set-off schedule and the debt. Those are the primary techniques that allow us to address risk and optimize the program. So lastly, in terms of timing, take a look at the timetable there. Keeping the next steps on schedule is of critical importance. This time frame is set out by the legislation. So you have our action here for approval today, and that in summary grants permission for the state system to enter into a contract with SERS for $825 million, 75% of the unfunded liability. The board then authorizes the chancellor to negotiate final terms and conditions through consultation with the executive committee. Looking ahead, then later in February, SIR's board will be required to approve the pre-funding contract. Then we'll be working with our underwriters to structure and prepare for the debt issuance. Under the legislation, we are due to pay the lump sum to SIRS no later than May 1st, so it'll likely fall around April 29th. And to that end, I want to also mention that we have the ability per our contract to stop our participation in this transaction at any time before that payment is due on April 29th. And then the start of the next fiscal year, July 1, is when our payments will go down and our savings will begin to be realized. So that concludes my update, and we're happy to take questions.
Okay, Tom, do you want to
Sure. Thank you.
entertain any questions?
Are there any questions from the full board or and certainly the committee? Okay, hearing none.
Brad Roy, I'm trying to raise my hand. I don't know if I'm doing it right. I have a question.
Okay, I can't see that page, so please go ahead.
Okay. I supported this legislation. I think it passed pretty close to unanimous, I think. When I voted for this, in the legislature, I guess I had more in mind organizations that had money on hand that could make their payments ahead of schedule might do that. I guess I didn't really think that much about borrowing hundreds of millions of dollars to make those payments, but I get it. Putting it in perspective of something that a household might recognize. If you had a 7% mortgage on your home and you could refinance for 3%, that would be a smart thing to do. The most ideal thing to do with the money that you save every month, you'd have a substantially smaller mortgage payment at 3% than you would at 7% interest. The smartest thing, the best thing would be use those savings to pay off a car loan if you had one, or credit card bills, or student loans, or something like that. An option that's not quite as good would be use that money to buy stuff that you normally couldn't afford to buy if you wanted to, add on to your house or buy a newer car or something like that. So I'm just a little bit, I would like to see all the savings used to pay off the other debt that the PASHE system has. There's several $100 million of bonds for different construction projects over the years. And if this is going to free up $20 or $30 million a year initially, or 10 million a year, whatever it is, it would be nice if that money could be used to pay off other debt. Now, I recognize that the plan is to use this money for the system redesign startup costs. I guess a question, this is a pretty long question, if it's going to cost $100 million to implement the system redesign startup costs, and this saves $280 million over 30 years, what's the other $180 million going to be used for?
Cindy, you want me to take that?
Yeah.
Dan, I think
you start.
that's one for you.
I have a comment too, but you go ahead. Go start.
Go ahead, Cindy. Go ahead.
No. Representative Roy, I appreciate your position. I'm going to go back to the big picture. If we are unable to go down this path and achieve what we're trying to achieve with integrations and the rest of redesign, we have a serious issue with the system. So there's a concept of relativism here, and relatively good, relatively bad, relatively more important, for consideration. So that's where I'm coming from. I don't like the fact that we have We have debt, we have different kinds of debt, we have structural budget deficits, et cetera. There are lots and lots of things that, we need to address from that point of view. But the higher challenge is redesigning the system, because if we don't do that, we can't do any of the rest of it. So to me, it just gets back to the relative question of what's going to be the thing that we can do that can set in place meeting the other challenges. And my first of all, when we talk about using this money for redesign, really it's going to affect the universities themselves. This is not money that's going to sit in the chancellor's office, right, and be used to do something that expands or emphasizes the chancellor's office work. This is going to be going to the universities in one way or the other. So that's the second point. The third point is that I guess depending on what actually happens and how much funding comes in early as opposed to the rest being spread out over the rest of the time period, I think it would seem to me that once redesign is completed and we're on a path, that additional funds that come from this years down the road can be used for some of the things that you talk about. Now, I could be wrong. I'm not an expert in this. I'm just thinking about it sort of, from the point of view of spread out over a few years. But I still would come back to the most important point that I think this is, which is I'm not sure we have other options to get the investment money that's needed to make these integrations happen and the rest of redesign. And so to me, it's the big picture. Because like I said, if we can't do that, I don't think we'll be able to do anything else on your list, which is a list shared by all of us.
Now, a lot of organizations wouldn't borrow $800 million to come up with $100 million. And I realize we have a lot of parameters, a lot of financial challenges. But it was mentioned that it's recommended that proceeds cannot be used for general operating expenses.
Right.
I definitely agree with that concept, but I don't see where that's in the motion anywhere, that proceeds cannot be used for general operating expenses. So I was wondering if the motion could be amended to say something to the effect of, add a sentence at the end that says proceeds cannot be used for general operating expenses. Up to $100 million can be used for the system redesign, startup costs, and the remainder will be used to retire debt, or something like that. Just because I guess I'm concerned that, we're gonna blow the money. I'm 100% confident that we would use 100 million of it, or whatever it's going to cost, for the system redesign startup costs. But we don't know who's going to be on this board a year from now, or 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, or 20 years from now, and I'm just concerned that we're going to hire people we don't need, build buildings we don't need, misuse the money. And I would be more comfortable with it if we could tighten this up a little bit.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. I will say that I was planning to, I guess I'm not sure if it would be a formal motion or not, but to ensure that the board does direct the chancellor to consult with the presidents and system leadership to develop an accountability-based investment strategy and ensure that these funds would not be used for general operating. So I would think that we could put that in the motion, and I'm going off the top of my head here. So Randy or Andy or Dan, tell me if I'm wrong.
I think Cindy, I think that's right.
Yeah, okay.
And I think that's sort of in the spirit of the thing. I would hate for us on the fly at this meeting to sort of come up with categories of expenditure that might or might not be useful. I mean,
Right, just the general sense that Representative Roy is suggesting, since I was going to, informally charge on behalf of the board, the chancellor to do that, why don't we get it into the motion?
yeah, and then I think leave it to, work with the presidents, collectively, we are the stewards of our system's well-being, and let us come back to you with some well thought out, analytically driven, ideas, and we can have a kind of a deeper conversation of pros and cons of various approaches.
And the language, we have the language right here, Randy, so you probably could just take it right from what we had discussed, what the chancellor had on his slides when he introduced this topic. And it does include net proceeds are not to be used for general operating expenditures.
Yeah, and you have Terry Trago has his hand up on behalf of Senator Martin too.
Okay.
Yes, just real quick, really, what the discussion that just took place is exactly what I know Senator Martin wanted to speak about. Unfortunately, he had to get off the Zoom to go to a committee hearing, but he had the same concerns and just wanted to, make sure that it was stated that it's critical that these funds are used for system-wide non-reoccurring expenses and won't hurt the long-term sustainability of the system. And I think the motion that is being drafted up probably would address that issue. So thank you.
Okay, I think we can consider this a friendly amendment, Andy.
There's been no motion made, so it's just.
Oh, okay. Okay. Hey, great. Good.
You're in committee session.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, would it be the time for me to officially make this motion?
I would have been making that motion, but you're welcome to do it.
And yeah, I would like to make the motion that the language that's up on the screen, this is in charge the chancellor to consult with the presidents to develop an accountability-based investment strategy that provides a positive return on investment, emphasizing student success and mitigates any associated financial risks. Net proceeds are not to be used for general operating expenditures.
And I will second that motion. Is there any more discussion? Committee members, all in favor, say aye, please, or any opposed? Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. We consider that motion passed then. Now we will turn to item 10A, authorization to issue refunding bonds in fiscal year 2021-22 on page 17. This is an annual activity brought to the committee this time of year that allows the assistant treasurer to take advantage of lower bond rates. I'm going to turn it over again to Molly. Take us through this item. Molly?
Yes, thank you. This action provides authorization to refund existing bonds to take advantage of favorable market conditions and generate cost savings for our universities. Historically, the board provides this authorization on an annual basis, giving authority to the chancellor to issue the refunding bonds when market conditions are favorable to do so. This action today is to provide authorization for the refunding for fiscal 21 through 22. Since 1987, we've saved over $127 million in net present value savings through this process. Last year, a total of $19 million in present value was saved over the term of the debt across 2 eligible bond series. In the coming year, only one of our bond series is eligible for refinancing, Series AO, which is a smaller series at about $23 million in outstanding debt. We would roughly expect to bring in about $1 million of estimated savings through the refunding process. This action would only be exercised if the market conditions would be favorable in fiscal 21-22. It has to generate at least 4% savings and the bonds would not exceed their original maturity terms. We conduct the issuance of refunding bonds in consultation with the University Success Committee Chair. With that, I'll turn it back to Chairman Muller.
As Molly explained, annually the board reviews the authorization to issue refunding for the next fiscal year. Based on the information provided on pages 17 through 19, I move that the committee recommend that the Board of Governors approve the bond refunding. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? If not, committee members, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? I don't think so. Thank you. Now we'll turn to the final item, capital reprogramming for Millersville. As you know, capital projects are approved as part of a 5-year rolling plan for specific projects at the universities. The request before us is to change a project at Millersville. It does not impact the overall capital plan or other universities and is recommended by both the system and the Department of General Services. I'm going to turn over to Molly now again to take us through that item.
Yes, thank you. This action is to reprogram $10.5 million of capital dollars at Millersville, substituting the previously approved Jefferson Hall site with their Brooks Hall facility instead. Jefferson Hall was approved in the 5-year rolling capital plan back in 2013. Since that time, Millersville took steps with DGS to complete preliminary planning with Jefferson, as well as they updated their master plan that was last completed in 2009. Through that work, they concluded that Brooks Hall would be a better candidate for renovation than Jefferson. Brooks offered better structural opportunities and proximity to the other academic locations. Brooks will be programmed to house their growing College of Business that currently does not have a dedicated physical location. The Jefferson facility is used for various purposes, such as administrative offices for their athletic department, as well as storage for various arts programs. The university will be able to relocate those functions to other areas, allowing eventually for Jefferson to be demolished. That's consistent with the strategy laid out in their new master plan that will make prudent and targeted reductions to their physical footprint. With that, I turn it back to you, Chairman Mueller.
Tom, Representative Roy has his hand up.
Fred?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yep.
I apologize. I just have a question. Going back, did we voted on the amendment, but do we have to vote on the actual motion also? On the prior thing, two things ago?
Representative, if you want time.
That amendment was part of the full motion.
Okay.
I believe we voted on the full motion, including that amendment.
Okay, I'm probably in a
Correct?
state house mindset where we vote on amendments, then we vote on the amended language, but.
Yeah, but that's because it was never put on the table as a motion in the first place. So
Okay.
we actually changed the language before we even voted on the main motion.
Okay, and then, but then
Yeah,
there's a
fortunately, you
second.
jumped in early enough. Yep.
And then there's a
Fortunately, you had
second.
jumped in early enough and we solved the problem.
Okay, and then there's the second motion to actually authorize the issuance of the bond. So we're going to do that later?
That was all part of it. It approved the service pre-funding and bond issuance was part of the motion.
See, it says it's all part of one motion.
Some of the screen.
It might have been presented as two separate ones in your materials, but
Okay, yeah, okay.
I understand your confusion, but we have it all in one motion.
Oh, okay, yeah, because on the agenda that they had it as
Right.
two separate
That's
motions.
right.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. I just wanted to make sure. All right,
Okay,
thank you.
but that's a good catch because I looked at that myself.
Randy, perhaps in the when we go out of committee, we can look at the second motion to make sure we capture the actual bond with the project cash maximum.
Yes, and also as the representative was making the motion, he said the motion on the screen, which included these components as well. So that captures it as well.
Okay, I think we're back to the Millersville item. As Molly explained, this project impacts Millersville only and will be the best use of funds for their updated plans. Based on the information provided on page 25, I move that the committee recommend that the Board of Governors approve the capital reprogramming for Millersville. Is there a second? Second. Thank you. Any discussion? If not, all committee members in favor say aye, please.
Aye.
Roy, I have my hand up.
Any? Okay, I didn't see it.
Okay.
Sorry. Go ahead.
It's really hard doing meetings like this, isn't it? I can't wait till we can meet in person. I guess I'm concerned with how this is playing out. As recently as 2017, a $10 million renovation project at Jefferson Hall was going to be done. Now that 10 million renovation project would be done at Brooks Hall instead. And the building that almost got remodeled is going to get torn down. And I realize that, you know, things change and plans change and everything like that, but I'm just very concerned. I realize there's the feasibility study or the campus master plan, whatever it was called, you know, several years ago that said Jefferson Hall should be remodeled. But I mean, as recently as 4 years ago, the money was approved, you know, $10.5 million to renovate Jefferson Hall. And now the plan is to tear down Jefferson Hall. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what if that project would have actually got it funded earlier and then they tear it down after they remodel it? And I'm just, you know, not to sound really negative and be a pessimist, but I'm always a little bit suspicious about construction projects because I think the most important thing is having good professors to teach our students, and how fancy the buildings are is just a secondary issue. And I'm just, yeah, I'm just a little bit concerned about how much vision and how much long-term planning and how much, you know, thought goes into some of these projects. And I'm just concerned about it.
Okay, a good question, I think, and your concerns are the same ones I had when I first saw this. I think maybe we turn it over to the Millersville president to take us through that.
Thank you, Governor Mueller.
Thank you.
Representative Brad Roy, thanks for your question. The issue that we have here is that this renovation was actually part of a campus facilities master plan from 2009, and it was in the second phase of that project. And at that time, the institution's intentions were to develop some sports complex or athletic facilities near the building. Since then, the concept as we currently have it doesn't fit into our new campus facilities master plan, which was recently put in place. We did that a year ago. Now, the question about that's the project being approved in 2017, 2018, I came on board in 2018. And after I arrived, as part of that's my efforts here, we looked at our previous campus facilities master plan that needed it. We are required to every 10 years come up with a new plan. Now, looking at that and the program array that we had, for example, our College of Business is brand new. It was just started last year. So when we compared that's our priorities in terms of what we needed now in terms of space for academic programming, we actually need a place for the Lombardo College of Business than this facilities, and that's the Jefferson Hall space. And in addition to that, Millersville currently have excess space according to the space requirements that institutions are supposed to abide by. So by repurposing these funds, it will decrease our overall space overage as a university. So if anything, using the funds to renovate Brooks Hall is a better use of the funds than continuing to renovate Jefferson Hall.
Daniel, thank you.
Thank you.
Teresa, I suggest we back up and go for a roll call vote on this item, just in case.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, of course.
Wait,
Yeah.
Yes, Brad.
What was Jefferson Hall going to be? What was that project going to be? What was the building going to be used for?
It was mainly for athletics.
Oh, athletics. Okay.
Yes. Offices.
Okay. Well, I mean, from that standpoint, you know, this is my opinion. A classroom building, $10 million remodeling job makes more sense than an athletic $10 million project. So I can support this. I don't know if you have to do a roll call vote. I can support this. That was a good explanation of why the project changed. So it makes sense. It makes sense.
Thank you. Okay, we'll take one last, all committee members in favor, please say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? I don't think so. Thank you. Madam Chair, that concludes the work of the University Success Committee. I now will turn this gavel back to you magically.
magically, except I don't really have it, but I'll take it anyway. Okay, thank you. I think before we go on to governance and leadership, we have a choice. I think Representative Roy was, Governor Roy was correct. And although the motion that has been recommended by University Success with regard to CSRS just does have the words bond issuance in it, what was a separate action because of its detail, in terms of amounts, et cetera, was shown in your board materials, as he said, as a separate, complementary kind of motion. So I think that if we just clean it up now, and Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, but if we clean it up now and actually, Tom, you go back and put a motion to the committee for this other action. I can't get the number of it, but it's on page 22.
10C.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I think that's right. I think if
we need to do that, right? So that we.
I think if we take up action 10C, that will then give us the detail to then the committee.
Right.
Take
So,
10C and then the amended motion.
Yeah, and we don't have to actually change the language of the other motion anyway. I mean, all it says is, bond issuance but I think we need to put this other motion before the board. So if you don't mind, can you?
Madam Chair, before you do, if I may just ask Vice Chancellor Minnick, if I think that will capture the authorities that you need to proceed.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Pardon the interruption.
Thanks, Sharon and Andy. So Tom, do you mind just going back and putting this item 10C up for a vote?
No, that'd be fine. I'll put the item 10C up for, do you want to put it on the screen, Randy? Or can you?
Sure. Yes, I can. 1 second.
Just so everybody can see it.
10C. Got it right here.
Yeah, and this is the authorizing language that's needed,
right.
Just to clarify.
So this is 10C here, and here's the motion language in blue.
Okay. I recommend that the Board of Governors adopt the attached resolution authorizing the issuance of bonds up to a maximum projected cash at $130 million. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Mueller?
Yes.
This is Andy. What amount did you say?
It says $830 million.
I apologize. I heard a different number. Thank you. And you have a second.
Okay. Any further discussion? I don't think so. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, Madam Chair, I think that does it. Thank you.
I do too. Terrific. Thank you so much, Committee Chair Mueller. Appreciate that. Okay, so I think we can now go on to item 12B, which is on page 39. Is that right in your packet? Is that where we are?
We're going to the Governance and Leadership Committee, Madam Chair.
Oh, I have, okay. All right, mine is
We got a little out of order.
out of order, so I apologize. Okay. Fine, so governance and leadership. Committee.
Don
Let me turn to Governor Hauser.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you know, this committee is focused on ensuring excellence and best practices in executive management and governance of the system and its universities. The committee provides strategic leadership and policy oversight regarding the effective distribution of authority, accountability, and responsibility among the Board of Governors, councils of trustees, the chancellor, and our presidents. With that, Sharissa, can we please do a roll call of the Governance and Leadership Committee?
Yes, of course. We have Chair Don Hauser.
Here.
Governor Feefo.
Here.
Governor Smith.
Here.
Senator Schwank.
She had to attend a committee hearing.
All right, thank you. Governor Mazur.
Here.
Senator Martin.
He
Governor
also had to-
Yeomans.
He also had to attend a meeting. and
Right.
Harry Tragan was here for quorum.
Yep, I'm here as his designee.
All right, thank you. And Governor Yeomans. I know she's there. And there's Senator Schwank.
Thank you.
All right,
Our first three actions today close the loop on the policy discussions we started last fall. And the fourth action is one of the most important things we do now is appointing student trustees. So to get us started on today's agenda for the committee, which is 11A, approval of new policy 2021-01, faculty council, that's on page 26 of your packet. To get us started, I'll ask Randy to provide the committee with an overview of item 11A, which is the draft policy that codifies the faculty council in policy language. Randy, if you would please go over that action item for us.
You bet. Happy to do that, Mr. Chair, and thank you, committee members. As you recall from the last time we were together, we took several action items and heard some updates on the status of the faculty council, and the board ratified the approval of operationalizing the faculty council, but asked us to come back and create a policy that would then codify that operationalization. And so the policy that you have before you today is that draft. It is built off of the recommendations that the commission developed. And in fact, when we wrote this, we were very intentional to use as much of the language developed by the commission, because that commission was so well represented by a cross-section of individuals, faculty, administrators, union leaders, and such. So if that language looks familiar, it should. It is the language that's probably 95% of it came from the faculty recommendations, or I should say the commission's recommendations on faculty governance. So just in short, the council policy, it's a brand new policy, and that's why the language is all green, and it captures the guiding principles set forth by the commission and lays out the roles and responsibilities of the council as described. Importantly, this does not include the one point of topic that we discussed significantly last time, which was regarding the whether or not the faculty liaison should be a voting member of the Board of Governors. As you recall, that was one recommendation in the commission's report. That has nothing really to do with the function of the council itself. That is a completely separate issue, so it does not impact this policy. And that is something that the board can decide to discuss in the future if it wants. But that does not impact this policy at all. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Randy. To get our conversation started, I move the committee recommends to the Board of Governors the approval of policy 2021-01 regarding the operation of the system level faculty council. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Plenty of seconds. Any discussion amongst the committee or members of the Board of Governors?
Don, I would just say a word, if that's okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I just want to, there are a lot of watershed moments we're going through, and this is another one, and they're all related to us redesigning ourselves. And this one relates to our priority of excellence in governance and leadership, transparency and excellence in governance and leadership. So I just want to really just note it as a moment. And thank everybody who's worked on this. Thank you, Don, for leading this effort. And, we should all feel good.
Thank you for those comments. Any other comments from committee members or board members? Hearing none, seeing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed votes among the committee? Wonderful. Okay, so next, if you're following along, page 30, I'll ask Randy to provide a quick overview of items 11B and 11C together, since they're both aligning to the existing policies of Act 50 of 2020. Randy, to you to go over those items for us.
You bet. And as is our practice, whenever we're dealing with policy, you'll see in the packet any language that is green in the policy is recommended or proposed new language. Any language that you see that is black is existing language, and any language that you see as red is language that we propose to strike. So looking at the policy 1983-26, the student trustee selection policy, we are simply adding some context to that policy to make it clear that this is now coming into alignment with the changes that we saw in Act 50, namely that after the local council of trustees and the university do all of their recruiting and vetting to find a student trustee, instead of them sending that name to the governor, they now send that name to the Board of Governors. And the plan is that this committee would review the nominee before sending it up to the Board of Governors for approval. It's a practice that we actually used for the first time last board meeting, and it worked well. And we will be using it again today in this committee meeting and board meeting, and seems to work well. Importantly, we are not significantly changing the local role for recruiting and vetting student trustee members. We think that's important that that exists locally. Local trustees know their students better than anyone, and we think it's important that they lead that and drive that conversation. And Mr. Chairman, as we said, we're going to connect these two motions together since they're very, very well connected as well. We have an existing policy on our books, 1983-25, that talks about the process for selecting a student member for the Board of Governors. And again, the green text adds some context regarding how to connect this to Act 50 and the changes that we saw this past year. The primary changes there, as similar to the trustee selection, is once the student member is recruited and vetted, it comes again to the Board of Governors for selection rather than to the governor. This is a little different in that because this is now adding a member to our own board, we are also going to create the necessary procedures and standards that will lay out the processes that we would use to vet and to recruit students. That is in keeping with our process and our policy process, where you have a policy that lays out the broad framework of what we want to accomplish, and the procedure and standard, which is created by the Office of the Chancellor, lays out how we accomplish it. That gives us some nimbleness in the future if something changes and we decide we need to do something differently in how we accomplish this. Having it in a procedure and standard allows us some flexibility. Again, those candidates would come to this committee first before being sent on to the Board of Governors, and we will actually be using that process this spring, since we have at least one student who is slated to rotate off of the Board of Governors. Mr. Chair.
Wonderful. Thank you, Randy. Thanks for that explanation of both of the policies before us. To get us started, I'll move the committee recommend to the Board of Governors we approve the proposed revisions to policy 1983-26, student trustee selection, and 1983-25, student governor selection. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, everybody. Open up to discussion with committee members and full Board of Governors members.
I only have one question. Will the governor selection occur only at regular board meetings, or will there be a separate board meeting to get a student onto the board in time to participate as a board member at our quarterly meetings?
Yeah. The good news is, because this process is now owned by the Board of Governors, Alex, we can do this anytime and any place that we want. So we're not sort of beholden to other outside forces affecting this. If need be, the board can absolutely have a special meeting to make these appointments in time. But I think that we'll be able to do it within our standing framework, but if not, we can absolutely do it with a special meeting.
Thank you for that, Randy. Any other questions? Not seeing any raised hands. With that, all in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, everybody. And moving on now to 11D, page 35 of your packet. As Randy mentioned, one of the board's new powers and responsibilities and duties, including in Act 50, is the appointment of student trustees. And we just went over that policy. Universities have worked with the Chancellor's Office to develop and utilize a recruiting process to identify and vet potential candidates in order to make a recommendation for appointment. The process has always been driven at the local level at local universities, and rightfully so, because these universities know their students best. In your packet is information about Miss Mia Swales, who has been recommended by the Lock Haven University to serve as the student trustee on the, excuse me, the Council of Trustees. And I'll ask President Pignatello, who I hope is still with us, to say a few words about this appointment.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Governor Hauser, and thank you, governors. I am delighted, to distinct pleasure to recommend Mia Swales, who's truly a remarkable young woman. She's actively been contributing to life at Lock Haven since she arrived on campus. She was selected to be our 2019 commencement speaker based on her accomplishments as an undergraduate student. She has a degree in communication and a minor in sociology. She chose to stay with us. We're very happy about that as a graduate student now in the clinical mental health counseling program, and she works as a graduate assistant in our food pantry, and her efforts have really been inspiring in that regard. She has a true passion for making a difference through serving and helping our community, and I strongly believe that that will serve her well as a member of the trustees, as a student representative. I encourage you to support this nomination, and look forward to congratulating Mia, and I wish her well in this new role.
Thank you, President Pignatello, for those words. And we are privileged to welcome Miss Mia Swales to our meeting today. And I understand she is on the Zoom, and I would like to recognize her and call on her for any comments she would like to make at this time.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I just want to say that I'm blessed to be here, and I'm extremely proud to be a Bald Eagle. Lock Haven has become my home and a great sense of my peace and pride, and I'm truly filled with great gratitude for this opportunity to be the student voice with Lock Haven's Council of Trustees. I look forward to the journey and the growth that is to come, and I thank all of you for this opportunity, for your time, and for your dedication to students and higher education. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. In addition to the significant vetting that took place at the university level, the Office of Chancellor staff has reviewed this nomination and information provided by Lock Haven and supports the nomination. So with that, I'll move that the committee recommends to the Board of Governors that we appoint Miss Mia M. Swales to the Council of Trustees at Lock Haven University of Pennsylvania. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, committee members, and congratulations, Mia, on this second step that you've undertaken in this regard. And Madam Chair, with that, our committee is adjourned.
Thank you very much, Don. Appreciate that. Terrific. Nice, happy agenda. Like that. Okay. Now I am back in order. I apologize for going out of order earlier. We're now back to full board session for the final items of today's meeting. So first, let us consider ratification of the committee's actions in one motion, unless there's anyone on the board that prefers that we separate them out. Okay, I will put a motion on the floor then. I move that the Board of Governors approve the actions taken by the University Success and Governance and Leadership Committees. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Any further discussion? You know what? Let me just double check, Andy, with regard to the SIRS motions. We're okay with that right now because we've taken care of that in committee. Just want to reconfirm.
We have taken care of that, Madam Chair. I don't know, Randy, if you want to make sure if the members, the governors can see the motions again, just so.
Yeah, just so we know.
Yeah, 1 second. My screen is gone, has locked up. 1 second.
Madam Chair, while Randy is doing that, I can tell you that the 10C on page 22 is as in the materials. So governors, I would indicate that is the issuance of the bond with the maximum project cash of 830.
That's the technical motion.
Yes, and then the amended motion that came out of committee and was made by Representative Roy would supplant 10B.
Right.
And Dr. Goen, I think, will put that on the screen.
Right.
Yes, thank you for stalling, Andy. I appreciate that. You'll appreciate this, Cindy. My handy dandy clock app seemed to take over my whole computer. It was saying, we want a break, and it was not paying attention to my.
I just hope it didn't give mine a virus.
So
Okay.
these, as he said, these are the actions that you are being asked to approve.
Let's just take a quick look. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page here, okay?
Here's University Success.
Sure. Okay. And then go on to governance and leadership. Okay. All right. Thanks, Randy, for being so quick to get all that up there. Okay. Is there, I had a second. Is there any further discussion on these items? Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Okay, these motions carry from the committees. Thank you very much for incredible hard work and for moving us forward, which is what these motions do. And we're all very grateful. Let's now move on to item 12B in the agenda, which is the ratification of the enhanced sick leave payout program. This is similar to the one we approved last year as a retirement incentive. And we have Brian Mubu available to answer any questions that we might have. So to get it going, let me put a motion out. I move that the Board of Governors ratifies the side letters with APSCUF, AFSCME, OPEIU, SPIFA, SEIU 668, POA, and SCUPA regarding the enhanced sick leave payout and authorizes the Chancellor to execute the appropriate documents. Further, the board authorizes the Chancellor at his discretion to implement an enhanced sick leave payout program for non-represented employees. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I'll open it up for discussion. I'll just remind people before I ask Brian actually to say a few words, and then we'll go to any questions, that these are side letters. And we have the agreement with all of the unions on this, and that's just sort of important to know. So we're not approving the program per se so much as we are that we've approved it with the side letters and the unions in agreement. So Brian, do you want to offer any further words?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a couple comments for everyone on the Board of Governors. There's a typo on page 51 and 52 of your materials. The bottom of that chart indicates a number of 11, and that number should actually be 13 on both page 51 and 52. So I certainly wanted to point that out to the board. I'll certainly add that, yes, Madam Chair, we have met with the unions that you referenced, and we did negotiate and meet and discuss with them the provisions of this program. It certainly is similar to the one we did last year. There is a little difference this year as well. That difference is we're actually creating 2 windows. So the first window begins from the tentative agreement that we've achieved with the unions through March 15th. Then those folks, if they notify us that are eligible to retire, they will in essence get the same package that we had sort of last year. And then we have also included on a separate window as well from March 16th through September 30th. For employees to notify us, and if they leave, or if they notify us within that time period and leave before June 30th of 2022, they will actually receive an incentive, but that incentive is less than the first window.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions?
There are no hands raised, Madam Chair.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Okay, terrific. The motion carries. I'm just looking at the rest of the agenda. We have a few more items. We did want to end on or before 1 p.m. Randy, did you want to give us a break, or shall we push through?
I think we can get them done.
Let's get them done then. Okay, very good. So our next agenda item is 12C, the appointment of an interim president for Lock Haven University. So as we all know, Dr. Rob Pignatello, who is president of Lock Haven University, has been named senior advisor to the Chancellor for Institutional Integrations, effective February 5, 2021. I guess that's tomorrow. And board policy requires the Chancellor to consult with the Council of Trustees of the affected university and then recommend to the board a candidate for the interim presidency. So based on those conversations, the Council of Trustees and the Chancellor both recommend that the board appoints Dr. Bashar Hanna, current president of Bloomsburg University, to also serve as the interim president of Lock Haven University. And as we also know, Dr. Hanna is leading the institutional integrations effort in the Northeast among Bloomsburg, Lock Haven, and Mansfield universities, and he has extensive knowledge of the opportunities and challenges ahead for Lock Haven. And because of this, he's able to provide seamless leadership for the institution at this time, while the university and the system and the board continue to work on the potential for institutional integrations. So let me now turn to Governor Don Hauser to make the motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the board approve the appointment of Dr. Bashar Hanna, current president of Bloomsburg University, to also serve as interim president of Lock Haven University, effective February 5, 2021 at 5:00 p.m. and authorize the chairwoman of the board of governors and the chancellor to execute the necessary documents.
Terrific. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion?
There are no hands raised.
Terrific. Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? All right, well, let me thank Bashar for your willingness to serve in this capacity, and let me hand over the gavel to you to say a few words.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm both humbled and honored with this appointment, and I look forward to listening and learning from my Lock Haven colleagues as we advance our partnerships together through the integration conversations. And further, I want to acknowledge the This appointment is an affirmation of the great work that the Bloomsburg team's done. And I want to thank all my colleagues at Bloomsburg for all that they're doing to make this opportunity available to me. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chancellor Greenstein, and thank you to all the Board of Governor members. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, and you know, thank you back. Lots of thank yous today, but I think they're all deserved. This is really an affirmation of the direction that we're taking, and as you say, all of the incredible work that's going on with the universities to affect this redesign. So now let me go on to item 12D, and that is the extension of appointment of Cheney University President Aaron Walton. So just a few words as backdrop and context. In 2017, the board appointed Aaron Walton to a 3-year term as president of Cheney University at a time when the university was facing unprecedented financial and operational challenges. And we all know the progress that's been made by Cheney University since that time. The university, most importantly, has reaffirmed its accreditation with Middle States, which was no small matter, as we all know, and has continued to make significant strides to address its financial sustainability, to restructure its academic program array, and to rethink how it operates, and all centered on our core priority of student success. So given the continuing efforts to transform the university, the Chancellor and the Cheney University's Council of Trustees recommends that the board extends President Walton's appointment for another 3 years to ensure continued stability at the institution and continued progress on their transformation. Let me now turn to brand new Governor Larry Skinner to make the motion.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. It's with great pleasure that I move that the board extends the appointment of President Aaron Walton at Cheney University to June 30th, 2024, and authorizes the chairwoman of the Board of Governors and the Chancellor to execute the necessary documents.
Thank you, Governor Skinner. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? I just want to reiterate, you know, the great pleasure part. Aaron came out of retirement to do this, and you know, it's there were bumps on the road, but we are where we are, and it's nothing short of amazing. And I congratulate him and his trustees and everybody for the work that's been done. All right, no other discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Okay, the motion carries unanimously. Aaron, can't thank you enough for your willingness to continue on this mission, on this calling. Would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank the board for the opportunity to continue the transformation at Cheney University. This is a challenging assignment. I have to admit, in my 40 years of corporate plus, this is probably the most challenging assignment I've ever had, but the most rewarding. And having spent the first 12 to 14 years on the Board of Governors before accepting the assignment, I must say that now is the time. We are at an unprecedented time in the state system. And I think the leadership and the direction that has been provided by the Chancellor, along with the chair, has positioned us to move forward, and we need to seize upon this moment and take full advantage of the opportunity that's before us. So thank you, and I will continue to serve the university to the best of my ability along with my team.
Terrific. Thank you, Aaron, again, so much.
Madam Chair, may
Yes.
I just quickly interject one thing?
Yes.
I wanted to, as we move away from this item, I wanted to do two things. One of them is to offer my sincere thanks to President Pinatello as he steps into a new role for the great work that he has done at Lock Haven, really pushing forward a number of important agenda there, leaving it a stronger place. And at the same time, welcoming him to my team. I There was some back and forth with President Pinatello on the question of resolutions that the board would typically offer to, such a accomplished leader in our system. And because he's not leaving us just yet, thankfully, we're postponing that great moment, Rob. So don't hang your tie up just yet. But we'll look forward to doing that another time. But I didn't want the moment to pass without thanking him personally for the work he's done and the great accomplishments he has made.
Thank you, Dan. I'm really glad you said that. That filled in a very important missing link to this conversation. I would extend the same to Rob, and so glad that we will have you to work with us for a period of time, and look forward. Maybe we'll even be meeting in person by the time we finally get to honor you properly. And so with that, a perfect segue into our last piece of business, which is to welcome back recently retired Jerry Jones, who just a few days ago actually retired from her role as president at California University of Pennsylvania. And Jerry, we want to make some time here to recognize your incredible work and leadership over the past 4 decades to help make California University such a special place. I do have a resolution to read as a small token of our appreciation. And again, we'll just reiterate the comment that I am so sorry we're not doing this in person. And I apologize for that. And one day, hopefully we will be all together. But in the meantime, I do want to read this resolution to honor you. Whereas Geraldine M. Jones has come to represent California University of Pennsylvania in exemplary fashion, from student to master's degree recipient, to her 46-year career culminating in her appointment at California University's 7th president. And whereas under President Jones's leadership, the university achieved many milestones, among them establishing its first doctoral degree programs, establishing the Center for Undergraduate Research, creation of the Rutledge Institute for Early Childhood Education, and the renovation of Hoover Hall. And whereas President Jones's dedication and affection for the entire region is illustrated by the numerous community boards on which she serves, the accolades which she has received, and having played piano for the Mount Zion AME Church in Brownsville since the age of 14, therefore be it resolved that the Board of Governors honors President Jerry Jones, salutes her service to the university and its community, and wishes her great happiness and health in the years ahead. By voice acclamation, I move approval of this resolution. All in favor, please say aye, or give your thumbs up too. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Terrific. And before you speak, Jerry, I'd actually like to ask President Driscoll to say a few words on behalf of the presidents.
Thank you, Chair Shapiro. It's my privilege to do so. Geraldine Jones was named interim president of California University of Pennsylvania in the spring of 2012, before any of us were here as presidents. It was a most challenging time for her university. She had to start making incredibly difficult decisions on day one, and continued to make those difficult decisions as an interim leader for almost 4 years, until the board wisely appointed her as the president in 2016. During those difficult years, she reestablished CalU's true north. Given this history, it is perhaps no surprise that her colleagues used tenacity to describe Jerry. And it's certainly true that tenacity and persistence are central to Jerry's presidency. I know for the record, Jerry, that no one described you as stubborn. But I do want to describe the core of Jerry and her leadership in the right way. Jerry is a tireless and stubborn advocate for her students and their success. She is the epitome of class, style, and grace. She is kind, welcoming, and supportive of her colleagues, new and old. We have been truly blessed by her presence and by the energy and engagement of her husband, Jeff, who has always made our partners feel like part of the team. In closing, I want you to all know that Jerry is full of surprises. We were at CalU in 2017 for a retreat. Jerry and Jeff are jazz aficionados, and so we weren't surprised when CalU's jazz band entertained us at dinner. Then Jerry came out from behind the curtain, not dressed as a president would dress, grabbed the microphone and started belting it out. We had no idea that she was a singer, but let me tell you, this girl can sing. It was an incredible, heartwarming experience for all of us. Jerry, you have earned your retirement, and we wish you and Jeff all the very best. We will miss you both and ask that you please stay in touch with all of us. Thank you for your many, many contributions at your university and to the state system of higher education.
Thank you so much, Mike. Those are wonderful words and well-deserved. Jerry, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, and thank you. And I will be brief with it. And as you all know, I retired on Friday, January 29th, after a 46-year career here at my alma mater. And California has been my school, my workplace, and my home. And it has been the honor of a lifetime to serve as the 7th president of this wonderful university. When I enrolled as a student at California State College, I had no idea what a remarkable journey lay ahead. I began my career with a strong desire to help students and achieve success, and that has been my mission ever since. And it has been a privilege to work at a place that I love. I owe a debt of gratitude to the hundreds of faculty and staff members who shared my vision of CalU as a place of opportunity. Together over many years and in many different ways, we translated that vision into action, and we watched our students thrive. And I am so proud of what we accomplished together. Yes, I am retiring at a moment of change for our university, but I truly believe its future is bright. Over these 168 years, California has grown from a normal school to a state college to a university, and it is ready to transform itself once again. I am proud of our achievements, but I'm even more excited about the success that surely lies ahead. In closing, I am looking forward to settling into a new home and spending more time with my husband, Jeff, and the rest of my family. I feel truly blessed, and I'm excited to begin this next chapter. So thank you, everyone, for your kind words and thoughts. Take care and stay well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Dan, would you like to say a few words?
Well, maybe just a few. You know, Jerry, you know this, I'm going to miss you. I think we all are. What few of you will know, I guess, is that when I arrived here as a new chancellor, President Jones was one of a few people who genuinely took me under their wing and provide mentorship based on her long and distinguished service, not just to Cal, but to the state system. She has never been shy, and I'm grateful for it, about telling me what she thinks and what she thinks I ought to do or not do, and that has been a gift. She has built around her a strong leadership team, which I am confident will managed this transition elegantly well, and really pushed the university forward, taking it to a next level where it deserves to be. And you have been a great colleague, a fantastic mentor, and I really appreciate everything you have done for Cal, for the system. I hope you will stay in touch, as Mike has said. Please leave your cell phone number behind, just in case we might need it once in a while. So I will miss you, Jerry. Thank you for everything you've done.
Thank you. Thank you. That is a special thank you.
And once again, Jerry, on behalf of the entire board, thank you for your incredible service and commitment. With that, I will ask if there is any other business to come before the board.
There are no hands raised.
Okay, hearing none, the meeting is adjourned, and I look forward to seeing all of you, I guess by Zoom, at our next meeting in April.